need one too?
No,
We'll call the Powhatan County Supervisors Workshop for June 3rd, 2015 to order. I'll do the pledge. If Mr. Hodge would lead us in invocation, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Please stand, if you can. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time to come together. Pray that you keep those people safe who are traveling to our meeting and also those who might need to leave early. Also continue to watch over and protect those first responders, not only in our county, but counties and states across the nation. Also those who serve in uniform and those who serve not in uniform in places we'll never know. Pray, Lord, we just that they would come home safely. Pray also you'd guide and direct our deliberations as you did in the First Continental Congresses and from there hence, and keep us mindful of those bedrock principles upon which the country and the county is founded. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Do you have any requests to postpone agenda items, add or delete, or change the order of presentation? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve it as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. At this time, we'll have our first public comment period. This is the first of two public comment periods. We invite the members of the public to share their thoughts on matters and issues that are germane to county business. This is not a forum for criticism of specific individuals or attacks on any person or group. It is also not the forum for political campaigning or promoting of business. Please keep your comments focused on the issues and subject matter over which this board has responsibility. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you're an individual, 5 minutes. Or if you're a group, please state your name if you come to the mic. Thank you. Seeing none, I'll close the first public comment period. We'll move on to item 7A, presentation about the Powhatan Resource Council. Ms. Wilder, I guess we'll turn it over.
Hi there, my name is Mary Ellen Freer. I am honored to say that I am the chairman of the Powhatan Social Services Board, and I co-chair the Resource Council of Powhatan, Virginia. Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Weiler, members of the board, and Powhatan citizens, I am here to share with you tonight the activities that the Resource Council has been working on since September of 2014. The Resource Council has focused on our mission statement, which is to promote goodwill and collaboration among our community partners to share resources and opportunities that would benefit the needy and the vulnerable citizens of Powhatan County. Our accomplishments so far have been building relationships among our community partners, inviting community partners to share information about their resources that they have in our community, and to determine the needs of our community, creating a plan to meet those needs that we feel can be achieved by our community partners and their resources, and increase transparency among community partners, and bringing them together to share their ideas, services available to the residents of Powhatan County. The Resource Council meetings have representation and presentations from the following community partners in Powhatan: the Coalition of the Churches, Women's Club, the YMCA, Backpacks of Love, Powhatan Today, the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, Parents Resource Center, Extension Service, Deep Meadow Correctional Center, Little Zion Church, 211 of Virginia, the YWCA of the Domestic Violence Program, the Chamber of Commerce, New Kent Resource Council, and there's probably a few that I missed. The Resource Council has begun to create a resource guide. Our goal is to have it ready for publishing by year-end of 2015. The Resource Council conducted a community needs assessment with the assistance of the Director for the Virginia Department of Social Service Central Region Office. This assessment has helped us identify and define the following needs in Powhatan County: transportation, employment opportunities, training opportunities, affordable housing, better health care for the uninsured. We are also very excited to share with you that our Resource Council is working with the Community Action Program to join forces, allowing us to provide additional service to the needy residents here in Powhatan County. Thank you for your ongoing support of what social services and the Resource Council groups are trying to accomplish here in Powhatan County, and that is to take care of our community. I leave you with this tonight. There are 3 C's in life: choices, chances, and changes. You must make a choice to take a chance, or your life will never change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of quick questions. And I appreciate the presentation. It's good to always keep us posted on what's going on. I think that's a great effort to try to coordinate with all your local partners, so to speak, both whether it's governmental entities or private entities and entities like the church or the Powhatan Coalition of Churches. In your study that you're going to, you mentioned a study coming out on like a resource manual on that, and then you mentioned already you did a needs assessment of kind of the local community of what was ranked in those needs. In that assessment, maybe you have it, or maybe it's going to be in the resource manual, or maybe it's in between, and that is, it'd be helpful if you get a chance maybe to give the board members, or at least myself, an update on the resources that are available for assistance to the elderly, both from federal, state, local, because everything kind of comes through you to some degree, or you know about it. And then you have, obviously, you got that level of government, but then you've got a broader issue of that. You got the Powhatan Coalition of Churches, and then you've got your other independent nonprofits or related nonprofits that are providing assistance of services, and it'd be nice to have a complete snapshot of that. In other words, in one place, one database where it shows, and it may be stratified. What I mean by that is it may be that, you know, you don't necessarily have a particular program, but it's across the program lines. Is that possible?
Yes, sir.
Maybe you already have that information.
That will be done, yes.
Okay. If you could provide that to me, that'd be great, at any stage of where you're at. And I know Catherine and both of you, do great work over there. So it'd be great to have that as a policy maker so that we have an accurate picture of that issue. So if you want to provide that, that'd be great. Just shoot it to me in an email whenever you get a chance, or call me, or drop it by my office.
All right, I will.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Williams.
You say you did a community needs assessment, and I think I got all of them down. I think it's transportation, employment, training, affordable housing, and access to better health care. Is that the ones that
Yes, sir.
came to the fore? Do we have access to that needs assessment?
We can give you access to that needs assessment. Do you want to come up and
I mean, was this a formalized document that was provided to you?
formalize?
Well, I
Not
mean,
so much.
something that pointed to these 5 areas, where you got the information from, how you were guided to these recommendations, or to these needs.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, may I? Thank you. We did that in one of our earlier meetings, and we did it with the assistance of Paul Oswell, who's the Director of Central Regional Office of the Virginia Department of Social Services, and we did it as a group activity where the members of the council who were there brainstormed and talked about what does the county need, what can we do to help the county. And we have several programs in social services that require needs assessment. The Community Action Program, Comprehensive Services Program, the Safe and Stable Families Grant, and then we have been talking to Senior Connections about a needs assessment that they need. What I'd really like to do is manage one needs assessment, one giant needs assessment, and then the various partners can take out of it what they will. But what we have now was done as a group activity with the initial attendees at the Resource Council.
Okay, so the reason I asked that question, I didn't know if there was any data analysis like, we get over at the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission occasionally from the Richmond Realtors Association, where they actually show by locality, what's on the market, what's listed at these price ranges. And so I was wondering if it was any type of, analysis of that information or that data that went into these recommendations. But what you've told me, Catherine, is it was a group
Yes.
discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
But perhaps not in perhaps parallel to that, the Community Action Agency is required by law needs assessment parallels almost perfectly what the Resource Council has found, except perhaps for the last one, healthcare. Transportation is always at the top of the list for our elderly to get to their dialysis or wherever it might be, whether it's in CAA, whether it's in the Resource Council. So they really track one another. I think that's what Ms. Freer and Ms. Pemberton are trying to say. We've got multiple of these little reports, and they're trying to bring them all together and say, what's the mega message?
I understand, transportation is the conundrum I don't know if we'll ever solve for whatever population in Powhatan County as a rural county. That's going to be a long drink of water. As far as training goes, we have made some inroads, with Billy down at the workforce group, where we're able to pay for the people that in this county that are getting training. And I received a presentation on that over the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission. And they do good work. They have real good outcomes, far better than what I expected, to be perfectly honest with you. And I told the gentleman who actually made the presentation that I didn't expect them to be able to achieve the outcomes that they achieved. So there are some things going on.
And I think what's wonderful about what the Resource Council is trying to do is to do exactly, Mr. Williams, what you're talking about. Identify, per Mr. Hodge, everything that's going on, and make sure that we don't create another set, another effort, but to bring the resources together and get a symbiotic relationship going. And that's what the Resource Council's bottom line is, creating that relationship.
I want to applaud you guys for beginning the process and working hard to do what Mr. Tucker's talked about. And it's exciting to me when you start talking about housing and workforce and transportation and all those things. We did, David, have a workshop, I guess you would call it, where I had myself and another board of supervisor, and Mr. Davis come from the Capital Region, had Catherine there. I had the librarian there. We had the Chamber of Commerce representative, and we talked about workforce and what we've done, what we haven't done, how we can capture more. While the results are good, and if we really start looking at the number of people from Powhatan that were benefiting from those services, it really wasn't that large. But out of that came some follow-ups that need to take place to begin the process to do a better job with workforce in the county. So,
Is J. Sergeant Reynolds part of the resource group?
They are not, but that's a good idea, and we'll reach out.
we did have, great question, we did have the schools there, because as I've noticed in some of the other localities, the schools were doing a good job with workforce development, which we were doing nothing. So it's a
Well, J. Sergeant Reynolds is huge in that area. They're constantly out there combing to see, what the market needs and what type of training opportunities they can provide, through their institution, and also with them working with the schools where the kids, going forward will have the opportunity to get a 2-year degree, while they're, simultaneous with graduating from high school. They sound like a good partner to have in that group.
It was interesting. I attended a seminar put on by J. Sergeant Reynolds, a town meeting basically, and it was local elected officials, employers from many localities around the area, and they had been charged, the chancellor had been charged with coming up with plans to address the future needs. And one of the things he said in there was the #1 job in demand in Northern Virginia was an electrician. And the need for trades and certifications will be bigger and bigger, and their job is he's got to formulate a plan to deliver to the legislators how to accomplish those goals in the community college system. And it was interesting, Philip Morris was there, and he was talking about the need for sheet metal workers and the number of people he's going to have to retire in the next several years, and how he has to have the sheet metal workers to take place. So it was an interesting dialogue. And so,
Supervisor wasn't on the list anywhere?
no, I don't think that was on the list anywhere, David. It didn't make the top 10 anyway, maybe the bottom 10. But I do want to applaud y'all for the efforts that y'all have began to bring the people together and say, okay, here's what we have. To Mr. Hodges' point, we all want to make sure people know what's available to them and how to address their needs and bring us forward. So, Mr. Norvig,
Mr. Chairman, just one thing. David, do you know if John Tyler does the same thing, or is it just J. Sarge Reynolds? Do you know?
Which same thing?
How
You
we were
mean
talking
the
about
workforce training?
Yeah, how we're talking about reaching out to J. Sarge Reynolds, has anybody thought about John Tyler College as well?
I'll be happy to do that. and
Because it's so
they can-
easily accessible from Powhatan.
They,
So-
Mr. Norvig, they were at this seminar that I went to representing.
Okay.
You know, you were not part of the board when we tried to figure out why we fund J. Sargent Reynolds versus not John Tyler. And basically, it was done long before we ever.
Are you saying I just stepped on another
We're in
landmine?
the J.
Sargent
Sargent
Reynolds.
Reynolds catchment area.
Right. You're
Not
assigned
that we're-
a community college by the state.
Right.
You don't opt into a community college. A locality that's assigned to it by a state, the state has divided up the regions of the Commonwealth into community college regions. And
Got
we
it.
are assigned to J. Sargent Reynolds.
And
That
by
makes
no
sense.
means will we ignore John Tyler.
Okay. And secondly, I apologize for walking in late. I'll review the tape to make sure I get every word of your presentation. I actually had a constituent ring my doorbell as I was getting ready to leave my house, so I had to spend time with that person for 10 or 15 minutes. But thank you.
Any other comments or questions from Mary Ellen?
Thank you.
Thank you for what y'all are doing. Thank you for the presentation. Next is item B, which is Child Protective Services mandatory reporting requirements. I think Catherine's going to take that.
Yes, but first I wanted to, if I may, just comment on workforce and transportation. And I can come back another time and expand at great length on this. But one of the things that we're looking at as part of the Community Action Program is to address some of these needs, particularly workforce development. And we're going to partner with probably Goochland Department of Social Services. They're running a program with J. Sarge. And we're going to look at other areas because Community Action is an anti-poverty program, and the best anti-poverty program is work. So, and we're also trying to work to develop some transportation initiatives just to get people to the free clinic and maybe to help people get to the grocery store when food stamp benefits come out. So I just wanted to add on to that.
Catherine, thank you for the workforce. One of the things I'm doing as a representative on the Capital Region is there's a fund set aside that we possibly could tap into also to probably bring some funds here to help assist with the whole picture. So we're a lot of things in the works, hopefully. Good. So.
And to talk about Child Protective Services, part of our Social Services Board meeting every month is dedicated to education. And we will talk about a program or an initiative that's going on. And a couple of months ago, we talked about Child Protective Services, and we covered the topic of mandated reporters. There are people in particular occupations that are required by law to report suspected child abuse or neglect. And some of those occupations fall into the county workforce. And so I wanted to mention what those occupations were. Anybody in my building who works as a family services specialist or an eligibility worker, all teachers, whether in public, private, or nursery school, child care providers. I don't think the county's paying any of those right now, but mental health professionals, so all of the people at the Community Services Board, law enforcement officers and animal control officers, anyone employed as a coach or a volunteer in a program that supervises the activities of children like the Athletic Association or Girl Scouts. Those people are mandated reporters. And medical services, the first responders, the EMTs, the fire department, the rescue squad, and any employee of any camp or youth center if the county was involved in something like that. The school system has training on recognizing and reporting child abuse and neglect regularly. We have reached out to them on occasion to let them know we'd be happy to do training if that's needed. Same with law enforcement. That's part of their basic training. But again, we've reached out to let them know we're there if you have questions or concerns. And we've also reached out to the rescue squad and the fire department that if you need the training, we will be happy to provide it. There's also training online if somebody wanted to go that route. I'm not a big fan of online training because I cheat, and I figure everybody else does too. But it's there if anyone needs it. The penalties for not reporting child abuse or neglect, if you're a mandated reporter, can be a fine. If it's a very serious allegation, which rapes, sodomies, and so on, that would be a Class 1 misdemeanor if the person was a mandated reporter and did not report. The fine is $1,000. The reporting time frame is 24 hours. That was changed a couple of years ago from 72 hours after all the Penn State unpleasantness. There's a lot of legislation, and those two items got changed. And while I'm talking about Child Protective Services, I just wanted to take a minute and let you know, if you have read some of the newspaper articles about a social service agency in the northern region and their issues with their child abuse reporting hotline, I just want to reassure you our process is not like that. It is not dependent on one single person. We review that regularly, and if you were worried about it, you don't have to. If you weren't worried about it, don't. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Question?
Just a quick question. Catherine, did you mention physicians as a body of people that are required to report?
I was basically covering people who are in the county workforce, but yes, all medical personnel, physicians, nurses, anybody who works in a hospital, a clinic, all medical personnel are required to report. But there's a whole long list, but I was trying to just cover people in the county workforce. Yeah.
Is there any statute of limitations as to when you can report it?
You're required by law to report within 24 hours.
It will change from 72, but if you came forward, though, after the 24 hours, you're subject to penalties. I understand that. But in terms of enforcement, is there any statute of limitations in terms of reporting something that maybe happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
I don't think so. I can look into that. I don't think there's a statute of limitations on it. The last time we talked about it, I asked the Commonwealth's attorney if he was aware if anybody had actually been prosecuted for that. And he could not find anything in Virginia where that had happened. But it's, it is there.
You're talking about the actual abuse or just the reporting of it, because she's answering to the reporting of it.
If you don't, if you don't report it within 24 hours, let's say it's something that happened 5 years ago.
Right.
You didn't report it, but then it gets reported. Can that person that did the child abuse be held accountable
Yes.
under the Code of Virginia?
Yes.
There's no statute of limitations in terms of when charges can be brought forward.
No, there's no statute, but the problem is it's hard to prove. The more time goes by, the harder it is to prove because, bruises heal, memories fade, and so on. So it gets harder to prove if it's not dealt with immediately. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Catherine, for letting us know.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7C, or discussion items, Powhatan County 2015 classification and compensation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'm going to pass out some additional handouts. The first one that's coming to you starts on page 21. It has nothing to do with item number 7C, but it falls logically in the handouts. And would you please hand one to the press, Tom? There's one extra one when it comes your way. The second, so the handout that you just received, page 21, relates to item number E, which is the CIP, and then pages 22 through 51 all relate to item number D, which is the Powhatan County Employee Handbook, which contains the policies that the board had asked staff to either update or to draft, and that's why you're seeing only the pages that are changes where we've drafted those, and then it continues on to have other policies. So the handout that I just turned to you are for items number 7D and 7E. I'm now going to pass out a handout for item number 7C. 7C is also found on page 3 of your agenda. And page 3 of your agenda references the Condrey plan, which is found on pages 3-13 and 3-38 of the FY16 budget book. So we did not provide that again in your agenda because it's already in your budget book. In the Condrey plan, there's two pieces of the plan that they presented. They presented to you recommended grade scales, or recommended pay scales, I should say. They presented to you recommended pay scales. They gave you 3 pay scales, A, B, and C. And all of those, the $33,000 relates to grade 11. Grade 11 was their starting point, and then from grade 11, you go a certain percentage up or down. So this information that you see that says Table A, $33,000, that is already presented to you by Condrey. We had a presentation by Condrey, and then staff also had a presentation at a later date on this. Again, it's in your budget book, is what you see on Table A. What I've added to Table A is the columns that are found to the right, which show you the percent between the grades. And in most grades, you'll see it's 5%. In some grades, you'll see it's 10% between the grades. It also shows you the percent between the mid and the max, which we had given you these informations. This just shows it to you graphically. So again, Condrey presented tables A, B, and C, same information. We haven't changed anything on those, but I'm recommending to you a different table. I'm recommending to you a Table D. So Table A was 100% of the average of the jurisdictions. Scale B was 98% of the average. Table C was 97% of the average. And Table D is 95% of the average. On Table D, you can see now it's called 31,350, and that's our starting point, and then again, they go up or down. And when we looked at the implementation costs, and as we presented, Condrey presented and staff presented, the first thing that you do in the implementation cost is bring anyone who makes below the minimum of their grade, you bring them up to grade. And Condrey had presented costs to you. We recalculated those costs, and even because staff has changed from the time that Condrey was here, staff have left or we've hired new staff. And so the cost for salary scale A, just to bring people to the minimum of the grade, is $142,000.
That's Table A?
That's Table A. The same.
That's a total.
No, that's only to bring people to the minimum of the grade. Yes, it's the total to
For the
bring them
minimum.
to
Up
the
to the
minimum of the grade. It is the total, including the benefits, 142. On Table B, the cost to do the first stitch or the implementation is $114,000.
That's B.
That's B. And my numbers are rounded. C, that cost is $90,000. And in D, it is $64,000.
And that's a yearly, annual basis?
No, that's,
Annual.
it would be annual.
Yeah,
Once you
exactly.
bring them
As
up,
it goes.
you continue paying them that salary. That's correct. And I wanted to remind you that in the budget is $249,000 to implement the pay and classification plan. So as I met with staff, we had employee meetings that were open to all employees of the county. We had them here in this room. We listened to we presented to the employees the same presentation that you heard about how the recommendation to implement. We presented the 3 table grades, and we asked for their input. And one of the things that was their concern, and also my concern, is that if you adopt Table A, most of the money is going to bringing people to the minimum, not leaving very much funds remaining to do the second step, which is to address compression. And with all the tables, we see compression. With Table A, you see more compression because you're bringing people up to a higher salary. So there was more compression with Table A and less money to address compression, which is why I'm bringing for you tonight Scale D, which is at 95% of the averages. We had a discussion about this. I presented it to the leadership team on Tuesday morning. And the leadership team consists of all of the department directors on my staff and several of the managers, and it includes the library director, the social services director, and all of the constitutional officers. They are part of the leadership team, and we met and we discussed the pros and cons of whether going with one of the other scales or going with scale D. And the consensus of also the leadership team was the same as what I had heard from the other employees when at employee meetings, is with scale D, you have less compression, and there are more funds available to address compression, which is a concern. And when you bring people to the minimum, I'm going to give you an example. When we bring people to the minimum, we have several new sheriff deputies who will be brought to the minimum, and then they will be making very close to sheriff deputies who have already been here 1, 2, 3, and 4 years. That's what we call compression. So if we're bringing them to a lower minimum, the compression isn't as bad as if we're doing it. And we also, as I already had said, that there's more funds to address compression. So we're recommending a scale D, which you're seeing for the first time, which is 95%. And in addition to that, we staff are recommending, I am recommending that we change this scale slightly. And if you would please look at scale D, and if you would look at the percent between the grades, and as you're going between grade 1 and 2, it's 5%, and it keeps going up to 5% until you get from grade 7 to 8, and it's 10%. And 8 to 9 is 10%, 9 to 10 is 10%, but then when you get going from 11 to 12, it goes back to 5, and you keep going down until you get from grade 20 to 21. Then it's also 10%. And when it was presented to us, and we were well aware of the 10% from grades 20 to 26, the HR manager and I, and we'd asked them about that, why is it 10%? And they said, at the higher grades, there's usually more qualifications required to get from a grade 20 to a 21 than there is to get from a grade 1 to a grade 2. So when we did this calculation sheet and we saw, well, wait, there's 10% in the middle, we called the consultant and they said, because of the market, they were recommending that these grades be placed at this 10%. When we looked at that, what we realized is the way that we do our pay raises, if you are promoted, if you're promoted from a grade 6 to a grade 7, that would be a 5% pay increase. But if you're promoted from a 7 to an 8, that would be a 10%, and that's not equitable. So to resolve that inequity, we're recommending pay scale DA, for better words, which you find on the next page. With this, we are not changing the minimum pay as recommended by the consultant. We are just recommending that we insert grades. At this time, there will not be anyone in those grades, so we would insert between grade 8 and grade 9 a new grade 9, and those people that are at grade 9 are still at the minimum that they were on the other scale. We've just added a new grade 9. They'll be called grade 10, and they'll have the same minimum, but we'll have a grade 9 with the minimum. And the same thing, you'll see that between the old grade 9 and the new grade 10, we now have inserted a grade. And again, those people that were grade 10s are now grade 12s, but it doesn't impact their salary scale. So the only thing that changes in this is that we have a new grades 9, 11, and 13, which were never in there. Grade 9 becomes a 10, 10 becomes a 12, and 11 becomes a 14. No one's beginning, salaries change at all, and it leaves that equity in the pay scale where everything goes up 5%. So people will see that their grades have changed, but their recommended salaries have not changed. That's just, in my opinion, a clerical change. So what we're recommending this evening is that when you adopt the pay scales, that it would be scale DA, is what we would call it. In addition to that, I want to pass out a sheet of paper that shows you some of the implementation costs and how they are divided, because I know it's a concern of, well, who is it that is going to be getting these increases? So on the sheet of paper that I just handed out to you, it shows you what department they're from, it shows you the grade, it lets you know whether they're part-time hours and then the part-time multiplier. It also shows their current salary. It shows you the increase if they were being brought to the minimum of grade A and then their new salary at grade A. The increase if they were going to be brought to the minimum of grade B and then their new salary, and so on, and the increase to the minimum of grade D. And so if we were to go to grade A, 56 employees would be receiving some type of pay increase. 17 of those are part-time employees. Under grade B, 48 employees would be receiving some type of increase, 15 of which are part-time. Under grade C, 42 employees. I'm sorry.
Where are you, are those numbers on the chart?
No, they're at the top. So
They're at
if
the
you
top, okay.
write them at, I wrote mine at the top of the
Okay, I didn't know
page.
if you had
So
them on the
I
chart
can.
already.
No.
We gotta write those.
You can write them down.
Okay, all right,
So
okay.
I'm at the top, and
I
at
thought
the
they were in there.
top.
Read them again,
Under
please.
grade A,
Right.
56 employees.
Okay,
And 17 of those are
17 of
part-time.
those are part-time.
all right.
Grade B, 48 employees, 15 of those are part-time.
Okay.
Grade C, 42 employees, 14 are part-time. Grade D, 32 employees, 13 are part-time. So please, if people are in the audience, I don't want it reported that we're only recommending pay increases for 32 employees. We're recommending an increase to the minimum. Step one of the plan would be 32 employees, 13 of which are part-time. I also want to point out that in this, by department, again, this isn't written, so by department, in county administration, there's one person. In the circuit court clerk, there's 3 people. In the Commissioner of Revenue's office, there's 4 people. In the finance department, and I'll get this in writing for all you students, in the finance department, there's 1 person. In the fire and rescue department, there's 1 person. In the library, there's 8 people. In the public works department, there are 6 people. In the sheriff's office, there are 12 people. In the social services department, there are 17 people. And in the treasurer's office, there are 2 people. So that is the departments that are affected. And one of the other things we look at is, well, what grades are these people? So we have, all of the people are at what we consider the lower grades, and that they're grade 16 or below. But we do have 1 person at a grade 23, and that person would not receive a raise under grade D. They only receive a very, very minimal raise under salary scale A. We have 3 people at grade 19s, all in the social services department. We have 1 person at the fire and rescue department who's a grade 21, which is a part-time assistant fire chief. And then the other grade is a grade 18, which is in the sheriff's department. So those are the high grades. There's not very many high grades. And so the dollar amounts for implementing are found at the bottom of the page. So it's the bottom of page 3 are the dollar amounts for implementing. I've given you those costs, but they're also at the bottom of the page. So the first number that you see, which is the 118,195, that's without benefits. So the 141,834 is what I had rounded up and said 142. That is state phase 1 with the benefits. So that goes across from A, B, C, and D. I'm not going to read all those, but that's where I got the 142, the 114, the 90, and the 64. I was reading up. The next number is the $249,000. That's the number that's in the budget. And then the number at the bottom is the amount, the difference between what it would cost for phase 2 shows you what is available to do
Compression.
compression. So with that, I stand ready to answer any questions. We don't have a recommendation exactly how to handle compression tonight. But I stand ready to answer questions on anything that we have. What we would be asking, though, is that you adopt on June 15th the pay plan. The pay plan is, again, salary scale grade D, and it is the list of positions with their assigned grades and their FLSA status. So that's called adoption of the pay and classification plan. Those two schedules, the schedule of the employees with their grades, not employees, the schedule of the positions with their grades and their FLSA status, and then the grade scale. That's called adoption of the pay and classification plan. The second thing that we would be asking you to do on June 15th is adopt an implementation plan. So tonight I've only presented to you phase 1 of the implementation plan, and I'm asking if the board would please add to their agenda for June 8th, either before or after their meeting with the board, discussion of phase 2 of the implementation plan for the pay and classification study. So, again, I stand ready to answer any questions you might have on that, or requests for additional information.
249 is the total now, right, Pat?
249 is what's in the
And that
budget.
includes both steps.
That includes both steps, correct, right.
That
The
includes
185 that I see under D is for
The
the
one,
salary
that would,
compression.
correct,
That,
yes.
if you, that's what you could use for the salary compression,
Right,
if you
I-
follow that model.
Right.
All right, well, then that, how much
And-
you
and-
can use, how much is anticipated for phase 2?
That's what I'm asking, that I don't have that recommendation for you, and that's why I'm asking if the board would let us come back, adding that piece of information to the June 8th meeting that you already have scheduled with the school board. We would show you exactly how we plan to implement. The way that the consultant recommended it was that everybody who had been here X number of years would receive 1%, X number of years would receive 2%, or X number would receive 3%. We've had discussions with the leadership team about addressing all employees first, potentially, depending on where they are in compression, but there are some that are already paid equitably and are new hires that are not compressed at all and are paid equitably. And then we've also addressed that we have a lot of people that have been here a long time that have not yet made it to the midpoint. So my focus is people that have not been here, who have been here a long time, who have not yet made it to the midpoint, because your studies are recommending that you should make it to the midpoint within 7 years. And if we haven't, we need to address that compression. That would help
I
employees.
guess I got 2 questions then.
Yes,
So you're going to be doing a targeted recommendation based on what you just shared with us?
that's correct.
And the second question I have is, are you going to be coming in with a higher amount potentially than what is shown here on the spreadsheet, that 185, whatever? is
No,
gonna
I
be
can't.
on?
I only have there's only 249,000 in the budget. That's
Oh,
all we have to work with.
That was where I was headed. so
Right,
I-
that's
I
all we have to work
I
with.
didn't know whether
Right.
some more money came into
No,
play
there's
or-
there's no
Okay.
more other money. That's all that's in the budget, and and staff has known this from the very beginning, well, since the budget came out, and that's what these discussions that we've had with both the leadership team and when I had meetings with the employees here in this room is, we only have $249,000. That's all there is in the budget. Whatever we're going to do happens within that, in that $249,000 parameter.
So you're going to bring us
A
the
recommendation
plan,
for
recommendation
step
on the
2.
8th.
Yes.
Mr. Williams won't be here, but he'll be able to have that data he can dissect, digest while he's sitting on the pier and or wherever he's sitting. I'm just kidding.
Don't even go there.
Well, I could meet with you individually when you come back, so that you have that benefit of what, or you listen to either one, we can do that.
Pat, this is the 185, for example, for phase 2, that includes any adjustments and benefits, if possible or applicable.
Yes, sir. It has to include, and there would be adjustments and benefits, because if you
Right.
receive a raise, we have to pay the FICA, and we have to pay the VRS. Those are the 2 benefits that we have, and those are the
Right.
2 benefits that are in the
So
calculation
the
of the
63,319 has benefits,
That
and
has
this
benefits in it.
185,681
Right.
will have to include benefits.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, so the 63, exactly what Mr. Melton said, the 63,319, which I had rounded to 64, that includes the benefits. You have to, and if you remember when in Condrey's report, it does not include any benefits, and that's why I had to revise it and say, wait, you have to have benefits.
Pat, are you also going to, when you give this targeted, David mentioned this targeted amount, is your recommendation also going to show that which remains? In other words, this doesn't probably solve all salary compression. And if it doesn't, how many people are still affected and what the differential is?
Yes, we
And
will
what
make
the
sure.
amount is?
Mhm.
So you don't need anything from us tonight?
No, we just, do I have your okay? And would you prefer to,
Absolutely.
you're meeting with the school board at 7 o'clock. Do you prefer to meet after that, or would you prefer to meet before 7 o'clock? Well, we can't meet before 7 o'clock. There's
No,
a town hall
there's a
meeting, so we'll
town
meet
meeting.
afterwards. Okay.
Topics for the meeting, I don't think it's going to take tremendous amount of time that evening, so hopefully we'll be able to wrap that meeting up and then still have a fair amount of time to continue.
Okay.
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 No other questions at this time? Pat, thank you for this data. It's something I was looking for, just to understand, to get to the 95% or 98% or whatever, how many would be affected, and so now we've got to roll our sleeves up and figure out what level of comfort we have and give you some direction on that.
And what I will do for you, and I apologize it wasn't done tonight, I will write out for you how many in each department, and I'll write out for you all those stats that you had to write notes on, and I'll put that in a summary sheet and send that out to all of you.
Thank you.
So,
Okay. We'll go to discussion item 7D, revision to the July 1st, 2014 County Employee Handbook, and that's on the handout you gave us. That
Right,
was
and the
on page
handout starts
20.
with page 21, which is the last page of our CIP discussion. So on this handout that starts with page 21, and it's at the top, it says Powhatan County Resolution R-2015-50, but we're not going
That
to.
goes
So we're going
item
to start
E.
on page 22, and 22 is just the cover of the employee handbook. These policies were drafted, and they were drafted by my staff prior to, they were drafted back in January and February. It was yesterday that I took them to the leadership team, and the leadership team went through these item by item, and I hope that we have incorporated all of the leadership team's recommendations for changes. So I would like to then say that these are drafts, and I want the leadership team to once again be able to review what you have in front of you to make sure I did capture all the leadership team's recommended changes. But I'm going to go through them
Can
with you.
I ask a question right there?
Yes. Mhm.
So if there's somebody from the leadership team who goes through this and still is concerned about something, they'll have to, if we were going to vote on this on the 15th, I think.
They're gonna come,
They
right.
still have time to
Correct.
bring that forward.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes, okay. So the first thing that you see is on page 26. So on page 26, the board had asked that I bring back a recommendation on biweekly payroll. I apologize, I realize I did not bring any of those worksheets, so we will cover biweekly payroll in detail on the 8th, and I will meet with you one-on-one on biweekly payroll. But if the board decided they would like to implement biweekly payroll, it would take effect October 1st of 2015. The date was chosen because it would be a pay period that starts, a pay period that ends, I don't have the dates, but I'll get you the end dates. The reason that date was chosen is because it corresponds with the FLSA cycle of the sheriff's office, who is on a 28-day FLSA cycle. Our pay period will begin on the same day as their FLSA cycle. It also had to correspond in a month in which the employees would receive two paychecks in that month to ensure that they had two paychecks in the bank prior to the start of October, prior to October 31st. So I'm going to go into much detail with this. I've already discussed that in detail with the leadership team. We're going to put out an Excel worksheet so all employees can see how this specifically impacts them. We have an Excel worksheet that you put in your current pay monthly, or you put in all of your deductions and your net pay off your pay stub, and it will calculate what it is that you're going to receive on a bi-weekly basis. So we're going to come back to this next week, and it will be the board's decision whether whether you want to do this or not.
So
And-
one of the things that we asked for was, for a real-life example, and not with somebody's name, but, so here's
We
what
have
it
that for
is,
you.
here's what it'll be.
I have that for you. And
Okay.
I apologize that I
That's-
didn't
I
print them.
understand. I just
My
wanna make sure that's
error,
what
I
I'm
did
gonna
not
see.
print it out for this evening, and so I will bring it back.
Okay,
And
perfect.
I can actually email all of those to you prior to that time.
Pat,
Yes, sir.
being as I'm not going to be here, I'm going to make a quick comment. When I followed up with folks, particularly in the sheriff's department, there was pretty close, a overwhelming majority of those folks that did not want to go to the bi-weekly every 2 weeks.
Correct, right?
And they had shared with me that there had been some confusion, when they first heard about it and were asked to vote on it, and I think all of us are familiar with that. They thought, well, bi-weekly was going to be in the middle of the month and the first of the month. So they went back and they went back and took another survey, a vote, and what they showed me was overwhelming numbers. I think it was like 90-some% did not want to move to that. For a litany of reasons that you're already aware of.
Right, right.
About how it affected their cash flow
Right.
and how their accounts are set up for automatic drafting, for their mortgage payments and things like that. So I just wanted to share that with you guys since I won't be here for that discussion. And
And we've
I
had,
too-
leave it to y'all to
have
make a
heard-
good decision.
I too have heard that, Mr. Williams. I have actually talked to the undersheriff,
Me too.
not the sheriff, and I've asked him to keep an open mind to look at. This board member, whether we choose biweekly pay or not, does not want to affect anybody's ability to meet their demands in pay and the way it flows, because, you mess with people's pay, it can hurt them. So I think, what I want to see is exactly what I think you asked for one time, or Mr. Hodge, or one of us did, and that was, show me real-life examples. How is this going to affect my pocketbook if I was that individual? I don't want to know names, but show me these things, so we can make a good decision. So,
Yeah, I think they understand that they're not going to be getting less money. That wasn't the issue.
The way it
issue
flows.
It was the way that the checks flowed across months and the way that, they're currently set up with their banks, for their mortgage payment. That was the issue. They got it in terms of they're not going to be losing any money.
right. And we did discuss this with the leadership team. It was at our previous leadership team meeting where I did bring to them the schedules that I'm going to share with you. And I did share with them, and I will share with you, that I had heard loud and clear that the board, or some members of the board, wanted to make sure, it was not the board as a whole that gave me this direction. Some members of the board asked me to figure out a way, if you were going to do biweekly payroll, to make sure that people had that money in the bank by the end of the month. So on September 30th, all employees receive their regular 1-month check. Then they will receive 2 paychecks in October. In order to make sure that by October 31st, they would have enough in the bank, on October 31st, they would have the same amount of money in the bank as they had in the bank under a monthly payroll. The board, and it would be my recommendation, if you're going to implement biweekly payroll, the board would need to give employees a 1.5% bonus with the first paycheck that they receive in October. And it's a one-time thing. It doesn't impact VRS. The benefits on it are 7%. I will bring you the cost of that when I bring that back to you. It's a bonus, therefore it doesn't need to be accounted for in the annual operating budget. It's only done, well, you need to budget and appropriate it. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't go year after year. It's not an annual thing. It's only done once. I will bring you those numbers. I will show you what it will cost. That is the only way to ensure that they have exactly the same number of dollars in the bank on October 31st as they would have had if they had received a monthly check. I will also show you what it will look like if you don't do that. They will still have 2 paychecks in the bank by October 31st, but it won't be the equal amount, but they'll receive another paycheck on the next week in November. So I will show you that schedule, and you'll be able to see it both ways, with or without. So,
All right, so the 1.5% bonus,
yes,
that would be a 1.5% bonus of their annual salary,
yes.
and this wasn't in the budget.
It's not in the budget because it would have to come out of year-end savings, FY15 year-end savings. And that's why I'm saying it is a one-time cost, which is why you can fund it with one-time money. If it was something that was going to occur every year, it would need to be in the annual operating funds.
So
Let
we
me-
have done, go ahead, I'm sorry,
I'm
Mr. Williams, I
sorry.
apologize, go ahead.
Because I don't want to
Yeah, I
forget my
agree.
thought here. So 1.5% bonus. And then, just as another concern that I have is, I didn't know about the 1.5% bonus.
Right, that's new to the
Okay,
board tonight.
That causes me angst.
Okay.
But another thing about this going to biweekly, doesn't this increase the amount of work, for staff and for department heads to be able to generate, the payroll instead of once a month? Now we're going to be doing it every 2 weeks, and we're going to have the time sheets in, those types of things. Doesn't this increase the workload?
We, in the finance department who processes payroll, we have our payroll clerk who keys all the timesheets, and she has done this and has been doing this since we asked her. I said, can you even get this done? And yes, she has informed us that she can in this time period, because timesheets would arrive on Monday, and you would have to have the money transferred to the bank on Wednesday, which means she has a 2-day period, Monday and Tuesday, in which to process payroll. And she has been processing payroll and testing that so that she is very comfortable that she could do that. But yes, that is true. She would be doing that twice a month rather than once a month, so that is.
No, every 2 weeks.
Yeah, excuse me, every 2 weeks, not twice a month. Thank you for correcting me. She would be doing it every 2 weeks rather than once a month. That is very true.
So with this added work, what does she do now? If we're only doing it once a month, what does she do with her time when she's not doing that?
When she's not processing it, she's
Yeah,
our
I mean,
HR
because she's only
clerk.
doing it now once a month, so now we're going to go to,
Right.
once every 2
Right.
weeks.
She processes accounts payable, and in what we've worked out with the accounting manager is on the weeks that she's doing payroll, someone else will have to do accounts payable, which would be one of the
Yeah,
other
that's
accounts.
what I was getting at.
So you're going to
So, I
have to
mean, she
shift
can-
her work. She can't do all
Something has
of
to
it.
give.
Right,
Something
right,
has to give. If
right.
she's going to be doing this every 2 weeks as
Right.
opposed to once a month,
Right.
those other activities that she's, been doing are now going to be, decremented by the fact that she has to do this every 2 weeks.
Right. And then the other thing that she cannot do any longer, and she's let us know this, is she was the BOE clerk. And it only happens when you go through equalization, but we're going through that this coming January, and that is very time-consuming on her part. We used to have her full-time, and then also we would hire a separate BOE clerk. And so that function we would have, and we have a separate budget for it, we would have to have someone who could act as the BOE clerk, and that would be it.
Mr.
When
Chairman?
we consider that.
Yes,
So-
Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, okay, well, I got another series of questions. Hold on a second here. All right, so we're looking at a pay scale change with the compensation. So we've got an A, a B, a C, a D, and a DD. And we haven't made a decision on that yet. So you got that. And then you've got the biweekly pay, which, if you're not going to interrupt their cash flow, it's a 1.5% bonus annually overall.
Not annually, one time. Okay.
One time, I
Right.
understand.
Okay.
So we need to know that number because it's different for every single scenario, is it not?
I'm only going to calculate it for scenario D. I'm not recommending A, B, or C.
Okay.
So I would only calculate it,
What-
unless you ask me to collect. If you ask
do you
me
know
to
what
do it
that
for
number
every-
is?
Not off the top of my head, but we can have that for you. We have the numbers. All I have to do is key in 1.5% and it'll produce the number for me. I just haven't done that yet. But with the spreadsheets are already there with all the information. Truly, it's one keying in this number times 1.5%, and I'll have that
Well, I
number.
understand that.
Yeah.
But, well, that's up to the
But
board.
I actu- oh,
Maybe
actually-
the board doesn't want, maybe the board wants another recommendation other than D. That's up to the board.
Right.
I
and-
understand that.
And now I apologize. I actually do have everybody's pay at A, B, C, and D, so it's an easy calculation.
Right.
We'll bring that to you on June 8th.
The next question, where's that come from again? The 1.5%?
You'd have to have savings in year-end funds, and
At the end of,
It's got to
you
come
will
from
have.
savings?
When I say savings, let me say this. In the current FY15 budget, it will have to come from department budgets which have not completely spent their budget at the end of FY15. That normally happens. We have an accumulation of all the departments. Sometimes it equals as much as $100,000 that departments have not spent in their budget. It just depends. So that's where we would recommend that it come from.
But we would be making this decision before we know what that is, right?
We have estimates of that because we've had vacancies in positions. Let me give you an example. The IT director's position was vacant until May 1st. So I have salary savings of 10 months on the IT director's position. Another position in IT has been vacant for approximately 6 months. So there's other vacancies like there, where we have the public works director position has been vacant. So we have vacancies in positions that would result in unspent budget funds in FY15.
If those department budgets don't go over.
Those-
assuming they don't go
Those
over.
department budgets are not over right now, and they can't, I say they can't overspend. We don't allow them to overspend their budgets, and the departments are only allowed access to spend their operating budgets. They can't take money out of savings and salaries and spend it for something else. They're not allowed to do that. So anytime you have salary savings, that always lapses into, at the end of the year.
we would, so we'd be.
Departments don't have access to their salary savings.
So we would be asking, so we'd be asking to vote on this on the 15th if we choose to vote on it.
If you choose to vote on it,
And
you
the
don't
year-
have to vote on
In the year
it.
it changes, when would we close? Or when-
June 30th, so
Okay,
we'll have a
for
really, we can come up
what,
with
2 weeks
salaries.
of projections?
Right, well,
We'll have that,
they'd be really
50
close.
50 whatever weeks of actual data and
Right.
2 weeks of.
Well, and I really
Whether
only,
whether it's right or wrong.
we only need to do the projections on the salaries, and we'll
Right.
be able to tell you our salary savings, because we already know who's been hired for June and what they're gonna make, and so we know that number. But I don't know it off the top of my head, but we can easily get that calculation of what our salary savings
If the
are.
savings weren't used for that, where would they go?
They would go into fund balance, and if fund balance was in excess of 15, they'd go into capital maintenance reserve. So,
Thank you.
for the estimate for capital maintenance reserve, when I told you in the budget time, I said, we're estimating that we'll have $600,000 to go into capital maintenance reserve. That assumed that every single penny of it, the expenditure budgets would be spent. That entire $600,000 was what we're anticipating to receive in revenues in excess of budget. Anything that were salary savings or expenditure savings in other line items were never included in that $600,000.
So excuse me, you're saying that we're going to have potentially 600,000
That-
over what our requirement is for the fund balance?
Correct, and that $600,000 comes entirely from additional revenues that we're projecting that we'll receive in FY15. That was in the budget
Right.
that I presented to you, those numbers that I gave you. And in the budget that I presented to you, it actually shows which revenues we're estimating make up that $600,000.
But
So
what you're talking
everything
about,
that
what you're
we-
talking about is different from
It's-
that.
it is different, because what I'm
This is
talking
mostly
about-
salaries where you didn't have to pay because the people weren't here.
Right, correct, those are.
Or it could be items that weren't spent in the budget, and to
Right.
Barry's point, I guess they go into capital
They
maintenance
all go-
reserve if
they're
it's
gonna
over
have
fund
it.
balance.
Right.
So the decision is, where do you want it to go? basically.
But all our projections for the use of capital maintenance reserve and what we need to use in capital maintenance reserve that you're getting ready to budget and appropriate have all used that assumption that it's going to be $600,000. So anything that comes in over the $600,000 is for the capital maintenance reserve that would be in, for use in FY17. So,
I have a couple of questions, Pat.
yeah.
I understand biweekly meaning literally every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks,
Okay,
correct.
but early in the conversation, I heard the 15th and 30th.
The
Did I-
15th and 30th is called semi-monthly.
Right.
And that is an option for paying people, is to pay them semi-monthly. And I did have this conversation with the sheriff and the undersheriff about how we could not make somebody whole if we went to semi-monthly. Because the only reason, not the only, one of the reasons for going to biweekly payroll is that you don't pay people until after they have worked. So people
Right.
actually work for 2 weeks, they fill out their timesheet, and they work through, the 2 weeks end on a Friday, they fill out their timesheet, they turn it into the supervisor, they have to get that to finance by Monday,
Okay.
and they process it, and Friday, a week later, they get a paycheck.
I understand that, okay.
And so in Hanover, they are on semi-monthly. They're paid on the 1st and the 15th. So an employee in Hanover who begins on the 1st of the month, they work from the 1st through the 15th, and everyone else gets a paycheck. And then they work from the 15th through the 31st, and then they get a paycheck which covers the 1st through the 15th. So they'll work there a whole month and get paid for the 1st through the 15th, and then they'll get paid in the middle of the 15th of the next month for the, so that's, if your goal for going to biweekly payroll is to have employees work and then pay them, which that was my understanding of one of the goals for biweekly payroll, it can't be done with semi-monthly paychecks unless you want these employees to go without paychecks for a month and a half, which I entirely do not recommend that. They wouldn't go without paychecks they would get a paycheck on September 30th, and then they would work October 1st through the 15th, and October
And get the
31st, they
check
would get
on
a
the
paycheck
31st.
for
Only
the
2 weeks.
only 2 weeks, and you can't do that to people.
Right,
So
I used to
that-
work in Hanover County, so I
Oh,
get
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
okay.
get that.
And it's easier to do that to a person when they first start and say, and they know ahead of time, you're going to start, and you're not going to get a paycheck for a month, and when you get that paycheck at the end of the month, it's only for the 1st through the 15th.
So there's going to be some months, every now and then, where they get 3 paychecks.
And we've shown that in the calculation for the employees, so they can see which month they would get 3 paychecks. And on the month when you get 3 paychecks, you do not have health insurance taken out, you do not have VRS taken out, because VRS is taken out 1/24th out of the 24 paycheck. So it's kind of, it's more than a regular paycheck when you get the 3.
So the concern that David voiced, and I've also heard from the sheriff's office in particular, is they are actually getting a little bit less money per month in their hand. They have to, because mathematically, if they're getting 3 every 6 or 7 months or whatever, they are getting less money, let's say, for the first 6 months or so, correct? And
Correct,
that's
yeah.
their concern.
Right.
So, and that's what the bonus is for in September?
The
Am I
bonus-
tracking that?
The bonus takes place in October, and the bonus only makes sure that you're whole on October 31st. So I
Okay.
can show, we've also done it, and it shows the cash flow each month.
I got it.
And so even on those months where the cash flow isn't equal, sometimes they're getting a paycheck on the next month, the 3rd of the month,
I
type
got
of
it.
thing. So we'll show you that cash flow, how it works.
Okay,
also.
I don't want to keep the
Yeah,
conversation
right.
dragging on, but I just want to make crystal clear. I get it.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
And we are going to make that available. The senior leadership team, when we talked about, I asked if I would please hold open meetings for all employees, and we're going to do that also. So, and answer any questions the employees might have on it, so.
So we're going to have this data for the 8th,
For the 8th.
and then we'll be able to understand, we'll have the facts. All right, thank you.
So,
So let's, I guess we'll go off 2.1 to 2.2, but go ahead.
okay, now I'm on page 27 on comp leave. This was a concern that came to us from the leadership team in that if comp leave must be taken within 180 days, sometimes that doesn't flow well within your work cycle. So you may have people where your busy season happens to be July through August, and then they want to take more time between August and December. So I said, I'm fine, I don't care if you do it within 180 days. My only concern, and this is what I expressed to them, is at June 30th, I don't want large balances. We want it paid off. We don't want them accumulating large balances for years and years. So we agreed that we'll take off when you have to use it, and at year end, anything in excess of 160 hours will be paid off. So you have to, these are people that are exempt employees. They must, these are non-exempt employees. They must, they're exempt or non-exempt, which I always say it backwards. They're non-exempt. You owe this money to them. And I also want to point out that even if an employee has chosen to earn comp leave, at any time that employee can reverse that decision. This is their money. You can't, you must pay this to the employee. But we don't want them to accumulate them, so we're going to let them accumulate it. At year end, June 30th, they can have 160 hours, and we talked about whether it be 160 or 80, and it doesn't matter.
So somebody could in the old system, I guess, accrue a ton of hours and
Well, quite truthfully, we didn't have accrual of comp leave
Okay.
for employees until July 1 of, a year ago, we put this in.
Okay, that's fine.
It is a benefit that is offered in the sheriff's office, and they did accumulate more because they're public safety officers. So,
Okay, thank
okay.
you.
The next section is a new policy that we were asked to write, and we're bringing it forward to you. It's an on-call policy. This is for only certain employees whose functions require them to be available to come back in an emergency. Most of these people work in public works. They're either responsible for coming back in if something happens to one of the wastewater treatment plants, or the people that are responsible for our buildings and on air conditioning, something might happen to one of the buildings in the middle of the night. These employees are required to come back in. If you're on call, you have to be available. That means you cannot leave the county. That means you cannot go out, and you must be in a condition to be able to return to work. And for that, you're paid at a rate of $1.75 an hour to make sure that you are available to come back in.
So we had no on-call policy?
We had no on-call policy before.
Thank you.
The next one is on page 29.
Pat, I got a question for you on that.
Yes, sir.
27. On-call pay is not paid for the hours when the employee is called back to work. What does that mean?
When you're actually called into work and you're actually here working, then we need to pay you your salary because you are working. So if there was, someone came in and had to do something in one of the buildings, the actual time they're here working, they're going to get their hourly salary. But they're not going to get their hourly salary plus the $1.75 because they're not on call. They're actually here working. They'll get overtime only if they've worked enough hours in that week to put them into the overtime status. So you're not automatically guaranteed overtime when you come back in because you might not, the rest of the week, worked enough hours to bring you up to the 40 hours.
So if
That's
I'm-
what all that's saying.
Pat, if I'm on call, then you're telling me that for that evening or for whatever length of time, I'm going to be making $1.75 an hour?
Yeah, and you have to answer your phone, you have to get here to the building within a certain amount of time. If you don't, not only will you not get paid, but you're subject to disciplinary
Well,
action.
let me follow through. If I
Okay.
get off at work at 5 o'clock.
Yes.
All right, it's my turn to be on call.
Yes.
How long am I on call till next morning at 8 o'clock when I'm supposed to come in?
Not in all cases, because we have staff who are working until 9 o'clock. So one of our building persons works until 9 o'clock, so we don't need anyone on call till
9
after
p.m.
he gets off of work. So we never have to have anybody on call if somebody is actually working.
Who's on, give me examples of, classifications of people that are on call.
You mean grades or
No,
titles?
just what they do.
The
I'm
people
just
that
trying-
are on call are the public works maintenance workers,
Okay.
and also the operators at the water treatment plant.
Okay.
And I want you to know all public safety officers, the sheriffs and fire and rescue are exempt from this because it's part of their position that they're on call all the time. And this is only for non-exempt employees. So we have one, I'm sorry, I should point that out. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get on-call pay.
That's what I
Marge
said.
doesn't get on-call
All right,
pay.
all right,
You have to be a non-exempt employee. In
That
fact,
was the
we,
key,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
key.
we have one of the supervisor of the water treatment plant. He is an exempt employee, and even though he's on call, and sometimes he'll have to come, he doesn't make $1.75. These are people that are non-exempt maintenance workers and water treatment operators.
Pat, where's the
And no
170?
public safety people.
Where does the 175 an hour come from? Just out of curiosity.
It was a rate that we had pulled different
Locality.
localities, yeah, and so,
Is that
Yeah.
local ones?
no, it was in Northern Virginia, but we'll get
It's-
local ones and find out what
it's
they're paying. We
consistent.
can do that, we have no
If-
problem with
if we're
polling.
using North, because the
Yeah, I was
state has
using
an
Northern
offset
Virginia.
for Northern Virginia.
Okay.
which is
It's
our
almost a
rate.
separate state.
Yep, we'll poll,
It's getting close. It's like Northern California.
or Detroit.
So I just recommend it. I mean, I think we should be comparable to the jurisdictions we always compare ourselves
Yep,
to.
we will do that.
I mean,
We'll
why
get
make
that
an
for you.
exception? I don't know if there's a policy reason, but I don't see one.
Okay. Okay, the next one is work schedule, and we put in an exception to the 8 to 5. It can only be granted by the county administrator or the constitutional officer. And then the next is on page 30, that's just a clarification of the years of service. We used to say less than 5, and then we said 5 to 10. Well, it means it needed to say over 10 and less, over 5 and less than 10. So it's very clear on how that, we're not changing anything about it. The annual leave share policy is a policy that we've never had, but we used to have a statement in our manual that said if we don't have a policy, we're going to follow the state. And we took that out of our manual, and one of the things that we used to follow from the state is called an annual leave share policy. So if there's an employee who is on FMLA, so that means they're out for a serious injury, and they run out of all their annual leave and all their sick leave, people can donate their annual leave to them. They can only donate their annual leave, and this is what this is for. It allows you to donate annual leave to
It's standard, like,
employees.
in
And
the
it's-
printed.
yeah, yeah. Okay, then the policy that's new is one of them that we were asked to develop on employee development.
What
And
page
it
is it?
starts on page 34. And what we used to have under employee development, it talked about required training and discretionary training, and buried in discretionary training was a little bit about tuition reimbursement. So we've left required training. It says if you're required, then if we're requiring you to go, then we will pay for it. And if it's something that you want to do on your own, which is discretionary, then you are on your own time and it's on your own dollar. That's what discretion, but we've separated out tuition reimbursement. So the first thing I have to tell you about tuition reimbursement is that this would be a new program to the county. No, it would not be a new program to the county. The county used to have tuition reimbursement, and tuition reimbursement used to, my understanding is what I've been told, I don't know this for a fact, what I've been told is tuition reimbursement used to be in each department's own budget, and the department would manage it. And what we've done is, and we've taken away tuition reimbursement out of everyone's budget. And we're going to create a tuition reimbursement. It's our recommendation, if you wish to adopt it, that we create a line item in HR's budget that's called tuition reimbursement. So I just want you to know right now, if you adopt this policy, there is no money, so nothing's going to happen in FY16 because there's no money in this tuition reimbursement line item. But I wanted to set this framework up, and if you wanted to consider putting money in a tuition reimbursement line item in HR, but it's all located in HR. Every employee follows the same procedure and the same authorization in order to get this thing called tuition reimbursement.
And that's being required for the.
Yeah,
Well,
it does say it could be discretionary, but it has to be expected to increase the employee's knowledge, their skill, their job. It has to enhance their it has to help them out in doing their current job or enhance their advancement opportunities in the same career path. So, you could be earning a degree, a college education, a degree, an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, but it also is available for certificate programs. So we could be sending someone to a welding certificate program if we had someone we needed to do welding here in the county.
But should I be paying for an employee that wants to move up the pay grades? Should I be paying for his or her tuition so that they can have career advancement?
That's your decision. If you want this idea of a policy called tuition reimbursement, we're putting it in here for you to do that, and we're
But
putting
I'm
guidelines.
not going to be seeing it. Who's going to be seeing and approving this? Is it the department
They all
head?
no, you have to have well, yes, the department head has to recommend it first. Supervisor has to recommend it. Department director also has to approve it, and they have to write up how it is applicable to their job or how it is applicable to a career path that is in the goals of that county employee. So let me give you an example. You may have a director that you know is going to retire in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and you have a really, really high-performing manager, and you say, if I could train that manager or have this manager get whatever next degree they needed, say they needed to have a bachelor's or maybe they needed a certificate, you could invest in that manager so that when the director retires, you have someone who's ready to take their place. It also helps, this helps with succession planning. And so,
And it's
but it-
limited to 2 courses a year and $2,500.
It is, and the final approval is by the county administrator on this one. And actually, it's something that has to be put into the annual operating budget. So every single board that's in place adopting the budget makes the decision whether or not, okay, in this year, do we want to have this tuition reimbursement program or not?
Pat, that's
So-
the key question is this. You're going to give us a budget analysis on biweekly pay.
Yes.
I think we need a budget analysis on every other single one of these we've mentioned, and critically this one. I mean, obviously, there would be a budget even on the on-call pay. But this is critical because you need a budget analysis, because if it's discretionary, like David said, and even though you've got these layers and it works up, theoretically, what you could have is, I mean, you could have a year where everybody fits into those niches and they all apply and they meet the criteria.
Here's
And
why
what's
you-
the budget impact? I think you have to have a max budget out impact. Otherwise, the board has no idea what policy really to adopt unless you know what the number is.
No, here is how this works. The first thing that happens is the board decides how much am I willing to put into this program. So you don't need a budget analysis because the board says, we are willing to put into this program $5,000. And this policy says, this year we've got $5,000. First person to apply, second person, people keep applying. As soon as we're out of money, we send an email out to employees and say, money's all gone, we're not doing any more this year. So you don't need a budget analysis, it's a budget decision each year by the board when they adopt the budget. How much money do you want to put in?
first of all,
That's
this-
truly how tuition reimbursement, you don't pay for everybody that's eligible
All right, well,
or everybody
let
that
me rephrase it.
desires it.
Let me rephrase it then. Let me tighten it up. Let me rephrase it. All right? So with your scenario you just described, you have certain people in certain positions in each department that may want to enhance their skills, skill-specific, let's say, to the department or their positions that they may move up into, all right? So hold that thought for a second. It's not I want to just go get an A degree, I want to go get an AS degree, I want to go get a BA degree, assuming the policy isn't drafted for that. Because anyone in their discretion could say you're bettering your skills by getting any educational advancement whatsoever at all. That's a whole issue beside. That's a policy issue on the language. But here's the issue I raise, is if you have those people in those positions that you have, and you as county administrator are aware of those, the people that may desire to do that, then each year, as far as a policy decision for the board, there is then a numbers issue here, because there's data from you that can be gleaned from department heads on people
who are in those slots or positions who may have expressed an interest in doing this type of work. So we do have a number because you have an expectation from those people in those types of positions, and the only way you know that is your supervisor should know, your department head should know, and ultimately you should know each year who's in those slots, because otherwise what the board's doing is we're just saying, well, we're going to give some chump change this year, and you guys all fight it out down there below us. And then we hope y'all get what you want as you race to your supervisor or race to the county administrator to get in first, rather than, if that's really the justification for the policy, is to allow smooth transition as you put forward, or continuity, then you need to know that as a policymaker where those are and what that number is. Because if that's what you want to provide for, if that's your end game and that's a justified policy goal, you need to know what those numbers are so you provide for that which you just put forward. If you don't know what that is, what you've done is you've cut the legs off of the policy that you're trying to implement, which is for what reason? Continuity, succession, and succession planning. I think you need a number.
We've done this program, not we, Manassas City did this program the entire 18 years that I was there. It still continues after I left there. It was going on before. And the policy, because of the way it's stated in the employee manual that when the funds are gone, the funds are gone, everybody understood the expectations that you are not guaranteed this, and every year it was a city council decision how much money they felt that they could fund. It wasn't intended to be a program that met the training needs of every single employee in the county. It's an optional program. You don't have to do it. If you wish to do it, you may do it. And
Well, that's raising the question.
it will never be a program, and it's not intended to be a program that meets the training needs of every single person in the county.
Well, that's the key issue you raised. That's the whole point. Then what's the justification for the policy to begin with? Because the policy justification should be what you put forward. Your example is an interest of the county, and that is you have this manager, they won't transition out, and what you want in place as a policymaker is continuity and transition training, and so you provide this. That's your policy goal, objective, end, or purpose. So your data then for your policy goal, objective, end is not merely, well, we're just going to provide an optional thing and throw you a bone. No, if your policy goal is that, if that is your policy goal for an optional program, I believe you need to match your policy goal with your data and meet your obligations. If you're not going to have that as a policy goal, you're right. The board can decide not to have that. But if you have this policy, I think you have to have a policy reason for its own existence other than, well, this is optional, it's just discretionary, and it's something we do. I think there should be an objective, an end, or a need that is satisfying for the county and or the employees in a partnership. And so whatever the board ultimately decides the reason for this is, I still think the data needs to match what the budget impact is for the policy goal. It's like the other areas of the budget. So
The policy goal of this is stated that the county will provide tuition reimbursement when funds are available to eligible employee who has completed coursework in either a degree-seeking program or a skill development program. That's the goal, and the key to it is when funds are available. There is no way that this county can afford, or nor would I ever recommend, a program and the funding for a program to meet the training needs of succession planning for every single employee in this county. It is an optional program that the board can decide if they wish to put any number of funds. It's known to the employees that this amount of funding is available, and it does not have a goal to train and do all the succession planning that's needed. I did give that to you as an example of one of the uses that it could be used for, and I also gave an example that said the only thing it can be used for if you're going to advance your skill path is that has to be stated in the employee's goals and objectives in their evaluation. So when these came in to the county administrator for approval, and someone is saying, I'm getting this bachelor's, it can't just be to say I'm getting this bachelor's. There has to be something already in the employee's professional plan, their annual, we call it their annual goals that say this is what they're working towards and why they're working towards it. But it is an optional program. we would never, ever be able to bring forward in Powhatan County or most counties and afford anything. So it's at the discretion of the board, and it's at the discretion of every single board every year when they adopt their budget. So if you don't wish to have it in, we just don't put it in. We're good.
So the decision is to have it or not have it.
And
And
again,
there's no funds for.
there's no funds in here for
this year, so the
16.
board
I
that
don't
would be
even-
actually appropriating funds would be the board that would be taking office in January of 2016.
Well, maybe if there's fun, I don't even know if we'll have funds for 17. So
Well,
you
we don't know that,
We
but
don't know
that would be
but-
their decision. It's
Right.
not this board is going to
Right.
fund it anyway.
Right.
So our decision would be to have the program or not have the program.
Right.
And, you know, I'm familiar with these from not from a public sector employee, but from a private sector. It's an investment in people. It's another enhancement to attract. I look at it as possibly, I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but I just know there are other reasons to have these, to allow people to continue to grow, which increases production. Most private employers have one, large private employers. Again, and I would never want to, you know, we could never pay for the education of all our employees. We could never afford those things. So, again, I like looking at it. You know, we'll have to decide as a board whether to keep it or not, and then, you know,
But it's
move on.
important to recognize that succession planning is only a very small part of this. A lot of this has nothing to do with succession planning.
It does.
It's to enhance the skill set of already existing employees. If there is a new certification program for water treatment managers, the money would come from this account, would it not?
It could also come from required training account. So
Right.
we do have training budgets, so we have training budgets, and if those are for the departments to manage their training budgets, and what they feel is most critical, they would pay out of their training budget.
All right.
It's another option.
Could be for
to
somebody in
bring-
IT that just decides he wants to get some additional certification, which wouldn't hurt, you know.
But wouldn't that come out of the
But-
training budget, though, like Pam was
It could be,
Only
but
if
suppose,
we require it. So
if
we have
if he was
limited
required to
training.
have it, it would, but if he decided to do that on his own, and you knew it enhanced him, that's a decision that you have to make if you want to have this type of program. Yeah, I'm not saying where you should or shouldn't, I just think that's the way you kind of have to look at it, so.
I have 2 points to make on this, Pat. It may be a good idea to look at it almost like a scholarship, because at colleges, there are, like right now, I've got my son at VMI, there are certain college or scholarships you can apply for at that particular college. They have a budget limit also, and maybe they can give out 3 scholarships for this certain fund, you know, and over here, there's another 2 scholarships. Nobody is under the expectation that every student will get that scholarship if they apply and qualify. It's known that, hey, there's only 3 of these, there's only 2 of these. And at my former workplace, it was the same way. There were a few slots available, and, you know, you jump in and apply for it and hope you're one of the few people that get it. As long as that expectation is made clear, I don't see a huge hurdle there, but, you know, we can sand off some rough edges. My second point is, well, no, I actually think it was answered, so never mind.
Thank you.
So the next is found on page 36. It's expense reimbursement. It isn't one that we were at, it was one that was already in here, and we've just wordsmithed it. It still is the same thing that we've always required. You have to have itemized receipts. Your director must approve them, and you must submit them. But we would like to receive all those within 60 days of the date of incurring expense. That's a major change. We've received some, you know, almost a year later. And actually, if it's in the next fiscal year, we just
Why not
refuse to
30
pay them.
days?
Because there's some that feel that it's difficult to get it in, and we were fine. Because the only, it's not that we're paying, if we were paying a vendor, we want our invoices for vendors in prior to 30 days so we don't incur. This is reimbursing an employee, and if the employee, usually employees are very anxious to get reimbursed, and they get them in before that, but we're allowing them extra time.
So this is money they spent out of their pocket.
They spent this out of their pocket, and.
It's not a credit card from the county
Right.
that is going to have to be paid in 30 days.
I can give you a good example is if you're required to go down to DC and you have to pay the tolls for whatever, you might not, every time you pay the toll, you know, and you get your receipt, you might not want to turn that in every time. You might want to wait and accumulate it and then get one check for more at the end.
Right.
You have to have detailed receipts. We've always required detailed receipts. And then we've just expanded on the county's purchasing card, saying we want the department director to approve, and it just expands on it. It's not doing anything different than what we already do. We already have a form, we just did some wordsmithing on that.
Do we-
The one that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm getting ahead of you. On travel reimbursement, you gonna go through, are you gonna be
In
talking?
detail, this is one you asked, the
Okay,
board
go
asked for,
ahead.
I'm going to go through it in
Go
detail.
ahead.
So travel and training reimbursement used to be covered just in that little phrase under expense reimbursement. You incur an expense, and we will reimburse you. We're proposing something to, a little bit different. We're asking that employees fill out a form. We haven't come up with the name of the form yet, but we're going to call it, for our sakes, a travel authorization, because we would like it written down before it's approved and on the same form, where it is you're going, why you're going, and what do you expect to bring back from it, and then list out all of your expenses. On that form, we can then assign a number to that form, and that number can be keyed in for all the different expenses, because expenses are paid out on a trip to different people or entities, and they're paid out at different times. And it's very difficult now unless you keep a separate file. But if we in the system, computer system, could put this number in, and then they said, what did it cost to send the finance director to the VGFOA conference, you could run a report right off the system that would give us that information. So that's the first thing that you see in the second paragraph, is that we want them to use a form. Then we want to see all of the estimated expenses. And it talks about using the most economical travel to get there. And it also says if an employee cancels, the employee is responsible for the cancellation fee, so we're
If they
not
don't
going to
use,
pay
if
those.
they don't use the most inexpensive travel, within, walking is always gonna be cheap, but if they don't use, the most reasonable, and this has happened in accounting before, where somebody drives their vehicle when they could have flown for half the cost, is the county gonna reimburse them?
It says here that air travel may be utilized if it's more than, this is a specific thing that you had asked about earlier, that's why it's a draft. And you may utilize it, you have to be more than 300 miles from Powhatan County building, unless there's some documentation that proves that air travel is more cost-effective. So there might be a reason why it's more cost-effective to fly someplace that's 300 miles than to drive. But it does say, oh, it's not on that part, it's under automobile travel, I apologize. It says, the reimbursable mileage is the actual mileage measured from the workplace to the destination in the event that employee leaves from the place of residence. I'm going to find this sentence. We had this, we had it in here, Mr. Williams, where it says, if you decide to travel, all mileage is reimbursed according to the most direct route, not to exceed the cost of the least expensive coach class airline ticket. I knew we had it in here, because you've given us that example. So if you make the decision that you want to drive to Florida, we're not paying you mileage to go to Florida.
Right.
Because
fly-
it would have been cheaper
fly a
for the
lot cheaper.
county to fly a lot cheaper. So you can go ahead and drive, but the amount that you're going to get paid for mileage is the
the cost of
cheapest
cheap fare.
ticket that we could possibly get to Florida.
Does this have the mileage rate?
No, because the mileage rate
federal.
changes all the time. It's tied to the federal rate.
So-
Whenever
That's
it
what it
changes,
says,
it changes.
Why were we tied to the federal rate as opposed to the state rate?
I thought the state rate was the federal rate. So we
Is
can,
it?
we can
I
check
don't know.
that, we
It's
can
not.
check that
I think
out
it
for
is
you.
not.
I
I
thought
think it
this.
is, it may be.
I thought
think it's
this-
set by the
I thought
IRS, it's a
everybody
standard
I
rate.
thought everybody used the IRS rate now, but
Right,
we
I
will
think
find out what the state is using.
Okay.
Okay? And if there's a state rate, we'll tie it to the state rate if
Yeah.
it's less than the IRS rate.
Right.
But if it's more than the IRS rate, we're going with the IRS rate. If that's okay with you, we're going to go with the least.
I just want to go with the one that's
Right.
most reasonable and applicable to us locally.
Right.
And I'm not sure that the federal rate would, when we're factored in with all the rest of the country.
Right. We'll do. So we repeatedly say you must use the most economical means or the most economical lodging, et cetera. The,
Do we set caps on how much we will pay for a breakfast, how much we'll pay for lunch, how
Here-
much we'll pay for dinner?
here's what we did do. We've always, in the past, reimbursed for meals on an actual basis, and we did not have a cap. And what we've done under meals, it's on page 38, it's the second one down. We talk about lodging first, and we do say you're not going to be able to spend the night unless you're more than 55 miles away from Powhatan, and we're going to only pay single occupancy rate. But now I'm on meals. We're going to reimburse for meals and incidental at the per diem rates. And it's a USGSA per diem rates. USGS puts out per diem rates, and they're different for every single city. So when you do USGS, you have to look up the city that you're going to and find out what their rates are. So USGS has much higher per diem rates for New York City than they have if you're traveling to
Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond for Virginia.
So it'll be a different rate.
Right, right, and you have to do that, and that's all we're gonna pay you, we're not paying you any more. When you do a per diem, though, you're not required to bring back a receipt. And that's the same as what the how the federal government does it. You're not required to bring back receipts, you just are paid a per diem.
Pat, I got a question.
So if you have a rate that says for Richmond, for your meals, it's $100 a day or whatever, $50 a
It'd be
day
more like 50, but, and that would be for 3 meals. right.
for 3 meals.
Right.
So if I decide that I don't want to, eat the 3 meals, I can just pocket the $50.
Or you could decide you only want a cup of yogurt for
That's it.
breakfast, and you could have
That's it.
something more expensive for dinner, right? So, yeah, you do run that, so that there's pros and cons of both ways, so if you.
Do other counties around us use that, or do they use?
We'll find out.
Because, again, I want to make sure that, we're paying, what we should pay, but not pay more than,
We'll do that, we'll find out what the state, if
I'd
the
like to
state
see what
uses the.
Chesterfield does,
Mhm,
or,
And then we'll find
Richmond.
out the normal, we'll poll them and find out what
They
they're
may
using.
even have it where it's actuals with a cap, or the
They could do
GSA
that,
cap.
and you could decide you want to do this, that you'll do actuals with a cap,
Cap.
and we can do that, so.
Right.
Pat, also on the lodging issue, same issue.
Yes.
Again, there's not, the way it's drafted now, there's not necessarily a cap. So
Oh.
I think that needs to be recommended to the board that, with the way it's drafted now, and we had that issue before, previously, in years past, where certain members of the board upgraded rooms and were reimbursed in full. So I think there needs to be a cap on lodging.
Okay.
That's true.
And
Yep.
most of them say as long as you get the government rates, then you're okay, but if you would like a cap, we'll look at a cap.
Yeah,
But
I
most
mean, it could be the
say-
same thing, it
Yeah.
could be a
You have to
standard, it could be a
get the
standard with a
government
cap.
rate.
In other words,
Okay.
actuals with a cap or something from some standard, I
Okay.
think. Otherwise, it
Okay.
just, I think we're opening ourselves up for a problem.
Okay. Then, page 39 is printed, wait, are there any other questions on travel? Page 39 is printed only because we did the, we had the numbering was different. Then, on page 40 is a vehicle use policy. We haven't had a vehicle use policy before, and first I want to point out, it's all employees, volunteers, or applicants. We use the word drivers, we're talking about employees and volunteers who have to drive as part of their, so when you see that word drivers, it's employees or volunteers who are required as their job to drive county vehicles. That's why I want to explain what drivers are. But it talks about how you have to have a license, and you have to, we will check in your DMV record before you're hired, and if your DMV record doesn't meet our minimum standards, or you don't have a license, you're not eligible, first of all, to even be hired, because if you're required to drive a vehicle and you can't, we're not going to hire you. But it does talk about what you can't, if you are in a moving violation of any kind, you have to immediately report it to your supervisor. If there's other violations that you immediately, and we can determine based on what you were charged with, first of all, if you are charged, you aren't eligible to drive a county vehicle, we'll determine whether or not we have any work for you without being able to, if you can't drive a county vehicle and it's required, that is terms for termination, it says in here. And there's some violations that if you get those it results in disciplinary action and termination. So I wasn't going to read through all of it, but it
Just a quick
it
question.
talks about the qualifications in order to drive. So.
Just a quick question, Pat. What about, is there a policy about taking vehicles home?
Well, I should say that they're, we didn't have it because nobody's allowed to take vehicles home. That was one thing, we don't have any take-home vehicles, except in the sheriff's department.
That's not true. When we came on this, in January, back, when we were elected, we found out that people in the utilities department were taking
Right.
home the county vehicles.
And you
They're
stopped
not-
that.
Oh, so it did stop?
You stopped that before I came on board. By the time Mr. Hodge, either someone stopped it, it
Okay,
might have been
I
Mr.
didn't-
Hodge.
I didn't know if it had been stopped.
Right.
That's why you see them.
No.
sitting
We didn't have a
on Sunday.
policy. That's
You
why the
just
whole point
stopped
was
it,
just we didn't
so-
have a policy.
That's why you see
I-
them sitting on Sunday.
So
No
So
one-
anybody
Just
that
willy-nilly.
has a county vehicle, they're not allowed to take it home unless you're the
The
deputy
sheriff,
like that.
you have to be,
Or
yeah,
fire.
and the sheriff or fire and rescue. So the public safety, we forgot, we have to write in here, public safety have, both public safety groups, the fire and rescue department and the sheriff's office have their own vehicle use policy, which are much stricter than these, by the way. And they do allow them to take their vehicles home because they're on call 24/7. So, yeah, nobody takes vehicles home,
Okay.
except those
Except
public
fire,
safety.
fire rescue, the
And-
public safety.
Public
guys.
safety, correct. No one takes
Okay.
vehicles home.
Is there any situation where they could take it home?
Oh, I apologize.
David, can you speak in, David?
Okay.
The people in the back can't hear you.
Mr. Mellis is saying that during inclement weather, employees are allowed to take the vehicles home because some of our vehicles are four-wheel drive and they need to get back into the water plant and they can't, the treatment plant, and they can't in their own vehicle, so they take home the four-wheel drive so that they can get back and forth. Thank you for
Well,
pointing that
if-
out, Mr. Mellis.
Let me follow up with Johnny for a second.
Yep.
If you have an appointment someplace, you're meeting with somebody in another county or something like that, and it's actually better to just drive the vehicle home and then go from there for your meeting? Y'all don't do that?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, we're good.
Okay. I guess we could state in here, we don't allow employees to take vehicles home, but we don't.
No, I
It's
just-
unwritten policy, you don't do that.
Okay.
So, okay.
Well,
So you're going to amend it to make sure it mentions the exceptions
The
to,
exceptions.
for the.
I have
fire
to, I have to
rescue.
write in here that
Okay.
the sheriff's office and the fire and rescue department follow their own. And
Protocols.
while I'm saying that, I want you to know that, and you all know this, that I've been working with the sheriff, there's many policies in the county's employee handbook where the sheriff's standard operating procedures are much stricter than our policies, and we're going to be inserting in here that if you're in the sheriff's office, please refer to this SOP or something to that effect, is what we're going to put wording in here. So that, you'll see that coming through on the revision also.
Pat, just a quick question here.
Yes.
You've got mileage reimbursement. I
Yes.
know we talked about the 60-day requirement of the stuff in here. It's just, it's wide, I mean, it's a year, the fiscal year, basically submitted
Right.
within the fiscal year.
Oh,
That
We
seems-
had in there 60 days, and then it was, when it went to the leadership team said, I only turn mine in at the end of the year, and I only do it if there's enough money left in my budget. This came from the directors, who are saying, I keep track, the Commissioner of Revenue is in the back of the room shaking his head up and down, yes. So he's one of the ones that asked us to make this
Okay.
change to allow it to,
From s-
they'll keep track of their mileage on the form and all year long,
Okay.
and then at the end of the year,
Okay.
if their training money's available or their mileage, then they'll submit it for, otherwise they don't submit for reimbursement. And also, this is one where I've also seen it in others that they don't do a lot of travel, so, or mileage, not travel, but mileage,
Mileage.
and they just wait and accumulate for 6 months. And we're fine with that as long as we have it for the fiscal year and it gets in the correct fiscal year. So then we're okay with that, which is why we said that, so. Okay. Now, we have gone through all the changes to the employee manual. We included in it those policies that related to employees that you had asked me to do. There's some finance policies that we wanted to go through with you, because we also have 2 finance policies ready to give to you, and one is the general fund balance policy. This is very long and very wordy, and it's written this way, I'm on page 42, so that it complies with GASB 42. And in the past, fund balance used to be undesignated, and we have a policy that will have undesignated fund balance of 15%. Well, there's no such term any longer in the world of governmental accounting, which is governed by GASB. They've changed all the terms, and so we want to bring forward to you this for 2 reasons. One, that we use it according to the terms that people will see in our audit, and number 2, so that you have your written policy. So I'm going to go through it for you, but I don't want to read it all. And you have time to digest this and come back and ask me questions.
Pat, this
okay?
isn't part of the handbook, right? We've
No,
switched-
this is
we've
not.
changed gears. Okay,
This is not part of the, we
That's
have
right.
switched gears.
Okay, that's
We're
right, I
on-
just was getting, we
we're
had
on-
handbook and then.
No,
we got the resolutions.
we're on
So
to,
this,
we're on
That
to.
this
is-
is
okay.
policies that we've asked her to bring.
develop.
I know it wasn't on the agenda, I saw handbook
Yeah,
and
no,
then we
I'm
go to
sorry, I
capital improvement
apologize.
plan, so
Yeah.
I'm like, I wasn't sure if this is like
I
a
apologize, I slipped this in
preliminary draft
on
or
you.
something, okay. that's
Because they
fine.
were ready to come to you. We've been working on finance policies.
all right.
This one's ready for you. And we haven't changed that your fund balance is going to be 15% of the undesignated fund. But the terms change, and so we want to point that out. It talks about the purpose, and it talks about why you want to have this policy, and why it's important to have a policy. Then it talks, the new term is called unassigned, not undesignated, it's unassigned, and it talks about why you want to have an unassigned fund balance, and then it states that the Board of Supervisors establishes unassigned balance in the general fund will be 15% of the general fund, social services fund, CSA fund, school operating fund, and school cafeteria fund operating revenues of the same fiscal year. I want to note that that's a change. We used to do a percent of all of those of the next fiscal year, but when the auditors prepare our audit, they always compare our fund balance to that current year's revenues, and when the bond rating agencies do the calculation, they're always comparing the fund balance to the revenues of that same year. So we decided, let's get in sync with the auditors and with the bond rating agencies. So we'll always be comparing the fund balance to the revenues of that current year rather than the next fiscal
So
year.
the unassigned fund balance for FY15 will be that amount of money at year-end June 30th.
Correct,
This
and compared to the revenues.
Compared to the revenues
Right.
that came in FY15.
Correct, and that's how it's reported in the comprehensive annual
Okay.
financial report right now, but that's how it will be done. So, now, there's something in the fund balances in GASB that say that you can assign or you can commit your fund balance. That used to be called, we reserve the fund balance, and they've gotten rid of that word reserved, and they only use it for specific purposes. And if you, the board, decide that you want to set aside your fund balance for some person or some reason, you assign it or you commit it, and a lot of people use these interchangeably, and but if you commit it, a commitment can only be done by the Board of Supervisors, and your senior level staff, myself and your finance director, could assign your fund balance, but what we've decided is that we'll just have committed fund balance. We're not going to go into assignments of fund balances. We're going to have committed fund balance, and it has to be done by the board, and it has to be done by a resolution. So in your case, you have one fund balance that you've committed, and that fund balance is your capital maintenance reserve fund, okay? So it does address that in the next. It says, at the end of the year, all general fund revenues in excess of budget will first go into the unassigned fund balance until 15% is met. So it's going to say the first thing you have to do is make sure you meet your 15%. After that, anything will go into all excess revenues over expenditures that have not been assigned or committed by the board for any other reasons will be committed to fund balance. So when you adopt this resolution, this is the resolution that we take to the auditors and say they have committed this, we want you to show it now on the financial statements that it's committed. So if you go back to the financial statements that you saw at June 30th of 14, even though you had, it was your intent that 15%, or anything over 15% was for capital maintenance reserve, it doesn't show on the financial statement. So if you adopt this before June 30th, your financial statement for June 30th will actually show, here's your fund balance, and this is the amount that's committed to the capital maintenance reserve.
Where did it show up?
It didn't show up anywhere except on an Excel spreadsheet that the finance director maintains.
So if we have an unassigned fund balance of 16 million, would we show 1 million being in the capital maintenance fund as a committed balance?
Yes, so if you had a total fund balance of 17 million, 16 of which is your unassigned, because 16 million is 15%. So 16 million, the 15% will show up as unassigned, and the other million, it'll actually say right in the financial, committed for capital maintenance reserve. It'll show up in your financials that way.
But will it show two separate amounts?
Yes, they'll show.
So they'll show the
Unassigned.
unassigned and then the committed as
And then-
two different balances.
Mhm, and then they'll show the total of 17. So they'll show 1 million is
I'm good.
capital maintenance.
I'm good.
16 million's
good.
unassigned, and 17's total fund balance.
I'm good.
So you can also commit or assign revenues or fund balances for a lot of different reasons if you wish to. There are some times when you're required to set aside your fund balance, and they call those, correct me, reserved. Or, yeah, and it's reserved only if something outside of your control tells you you must set it aside. So there may be some trust agreement, there may be some bond covenants that say that you must have this fund balance set aside. So fund balances that are reserved, in our case, if we receive bond proceeds, the bonds proceeds have to be spent on a certain project. You may not do anything with it, and if there's funds left over at the end of the year, they'll show up as reserved. Okay, that's just an example. But you don't have to do anything in your policy on that. It's automatically done by GASB. Okay, so it does. If you have a good fund balance, you have to address when you're allowed to go below 15%. If you have a good fund balance policy, you need to address when you're allowed to go below fund balance, and if you're allowed to go below the 15%, you have to have, or it's highly recommended by the bond rating agencies, that you also address how you are going to bring it back up to the 15%. So that's why we've left it open that if you need to use unassigned fund balance, and it talks about when you may want to use it, but it also says if you authorize the use of unassigned fund balance, you cannot do it unless you also at the same time have a plan to replenish that unassigned fund balance. So that's what this fund balance policy says. So.
Okay.
The next one is found on page 45, and this is the budgetary control policy. Everything that's in here, you have it in the resolution when you adopt the budget. So if you look on page 50 and 51, we're talking about all of these policies that you put in here. We would like, and we recommend, not that we like, we recommend that you have a budgetary control policy. And it does state the same things. I haven't put in here anything that is any different than what's in there, but I'll go through
So
them.
in each year's budget, you already have a control policy as part of what we
It's part of,
agreed to.
it's part of the.
You
re-
just want it to be standalone in
Yeah, we
addition
would,
to.
yes, it's a
Got
good,
it.
it is a good practice to have it
Got
be
it.
standalone. There will be some of the now therefore be resolves that you found on 50 and 51 that are appropriate to have in that, and we will leave those now therefore be it resolves in your budget resolution for next year. But the ones that are already repeated in your standalone budget control policy will be here. So the terms that we use are legal level of control, because that's what's required by GASB. The legal level of control is at the fund level. That's what you do now. You have allowed the nothing, the legal level of control means when do you have to bring it back to the Board of Supervisors for approval. So it does say you have, anytime there's new appropriations of funds, they must be brought back to the board, and you'll have a public hearing. As long as it's within a fund, the county administrator is allowed to move funds within a fund, to move the budget, and that's currently how it is. But it does say something that anytime we're talking about contingencies, reserves, or capital projects, all of those require a resolution of the board, even though they are within the legal limit of the budgetary control. So there are some things that outside the legal level of control. Legal level of control is something that we need to have per GASB for reporting purposes in the CAFR. So that's why we use that term, legal level of control. It's a GASB term.
So when the auditors come in, they look for these things?
They do look for these
And
things.
you get a check or not a check?
They do. And that, more importantly, the ones that look for these things are the bond rating agencies. So we want to keep bringing back to you finance policies so that, and that will really help us with the bond rating agencies, that these policies have been formally adopted by the board. Okay, that's my presentation. Questions on item D?
A lot of data.
It is a lot.
Thank
Lots
you,
of
Pat.
people.
The policies, I think, will help us as we deal with the CAFRA and then our bond rating. Maybe we'll reach that AAA bond rating eventually and continue to improve ourselves in our professionalism. So,
Mr. Chairman, I do have one follow-up
Yes.
question on the tuition reimbursement thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but is there anything that prevents somebody from going through a certification course and we pay for that, and then with their newfound certification, they skip and go over to Chesterfield or Henrico or something, and we just paid for that?
It is in the policy that says that if you leave, anything that we have paid on your behalf for the previous 2 years, you will pay that back to us.
Great, okay, thank you.
That can be changed to whatever you wish.
if we've been sitting for 2 hours, if you wouldn't give me about a 5-minute break before we jump into 7E, we'd greatly appreciate it. Are we okay to recess for 5 minutes, Larry? 5 minutes? Okay. You okay? Take a recess for 5 minutes and we'll roll. I apologize.
I got to stand
Hmm?
up, too.
Why would you call him out?
Because he usually gets out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm still going.
I knocked some.
CIP, the estimated cost for Cobb's Creek. We've known the estimated cost for Cobb's Creek for many years. The number hasn't changed since I came to the county 2 years ago, and it's $59 million. And if the board wanted to, if you look on page 11, the Cobb's Creek Reservoir is blank right now. We were waiting till we had a signed contract, which we don't at this point have a signed contract with Henrico. So technically, because we don't have a signed contract, we have yet no commitment to the $60 million. But it's at the option of the board. If you'd like to put it out into future years, you could add the $60 million. So that would be a board decision if they want to add it. So I'm on page 11.
So
I'm
this
on
is-
project number UT0011.
This is just a placeholder line item right
It
now?
would be right now it's a placeholder, and it's a placeholder because we don't have a signed contract with Henrico. We're still negotiating with Henrico. And as I said, this $59 million is a number that's been known. I know it was a number that was told to me when I came here 2 years ago, so I don't know how long it was.
We've had different numbers.
Right, but since I've been here, the
That's right.
number has never changed. It's always been $59 million. So that
The
would be
only
a discussion.
question the only question I have is, if we take that 59 million, we put it into the out years as deferred, we're talking about looking at beginning those payments in, what is it, 2021,
2023.
2023.
So
Okay.
you could put it in future, or you could put it in deferred, or because you don't have a contract. Well, we don't
Right.
have contracts
Well,
on
that's-
many of
that's-
this
that's
stuff, so
right.
it's just a.
Assume the worst case
Yeah.
scenario. If you put it in 2023, what is the effect of what we're proposing to do with the 5-year, 6-year CIP data that we have here, carrying this information forward with this total amount going into deferred years? We've already got amounts out there that are being deferred.
Correct, so the amount,
So
the amounts
that would
that,
add, that would bring us up to how much total
Right.
with what we got already that we pushed out?
what's in deferred, correct, currently is the 52,270,000, and it's for two projects that are called Future Master Plan Water Projects and Future Master Plan Wastewater Projects. Those projects are contingent upon development and are way out, well past 2023. And again, those would have other funding sources than what we may or may not use for
Are
Cobb's
you
Creek.
talking about, for example, what we had in the
Yeah, they're,
utilities
In the
plan
utilities.
Yeah.
for bringing the water up?
yeah, correct,
522,
right.
and then-
Those are only
So
going,
that,
that's really.
somebody else might be paying for that versus the county.
That's exactly right. So that's why when you talk about how does it affect what else is in deferred? Now, for financing the $60 million, if we were to enter into an agreement, I rounded up to 60, but if we were to enter into an agreement with Henrico, and we may not have a $60 million liability all at once, it may become in, so we don't have that information yet. We do have bond capacity. If you go back to the, and I don't have them in front of me, I'm sorry, but I did the analysis, and I would show you where you have bond capacity, and I always had this line item that said unidentified projects, and you would say, what are unidentified projects? So you have bond capacity that could be put towards Cobb's Creek if that's what you chose to do,
Well,
so.
at this point, Pat, until we have more information, like we talked the other night.
Correct.
I would suggest just go ahead and put it out there. We know it's going to
Okay.
come.
In-
We don't know exactly how it's going to come.
In 2023, you think we should put the 59 million in 2023, or
Well-
just a future project?
Right, well, there's no
There's
2023.
no, I know there's no 2023, but we'll just put it in a
Future projects.
Future years.
future
Right.
years.
Right, as long
Okay.
as we know, my point has been all along is, I need to be able to plan, not for today, not for 5 years, but looking out of all the things that we have to do to implement the comprehensive plan. So as long as we have it out there that we can see it, and we know this is something we got to do, and we can manage accordingly, with our debt capacity and our ability to pay, and not raise taxes, where people won't be able to afford to live in the county, I'm fine with that.
I agree.
I agree,
Okay, all right.
definitely.
So we're gonna put that number in, and when we bring it back to you on the 15th for adoption, I'll have that number. And then there is another project, which we have subsequently assigned a number called U20012. We only temporarily assigned it because we don't know if the board wants it to be a project or not be a project. And we're still gathering information for the board on this project. The board authorized the county to have water and sewer lines designed under the Route 711 expansion that's taking place east of 288 towards the Chesterfield line. And the money, the board budget and appropriated funds for that, the design has been done, and they have, VDOT has estimated costs for that. So within the next week or so, we'll have more information and have more of a recommendation for you on that project, and we would want to bring that forward to you, and we could either put it now in the CIP, or we could bring forward appropriations to you after you adopt the CIP once we have information. But I didn't want you to adopt a CIP and then say, we've got the VDOT information that we've been waiting for, the VDOT information has come in. So I wanted you
I know
aware of the VDOT information.
I know personally where I'm at already on
Okay,
this issue.
okay.
So this is not a stumbling block for me. But what I do want to do, and I don't want to, violate closed meeting that we had the other night and what
right.
was discussed, but I would like more information coming back to the board based on what we talked about in that meeting that you were going to do. And then they can make a decision. I know where I'm at.
Right.
But, my colleagues can make an informed decision.
So here's what we're saying to you is, you've asked, we're getting information for you for the VDOT letter for you to make a decision. We also know that staff are recommending that you adopt a CIP. And staff is comfortable that you adopt a CIP, even though you may have another project coming to you after the adoption of the CIP. It has happened in the past not just for Powhatan County, but other local governments. Things happen after you adopt your plan.
Let me go back to something you
So-
shared with us. You said, that when we adopt the CIP, the things that are in FY16, basically, these are the things that we're going to do. After 16, it's a plan.
Well, yes, that's correct, sir. And in fact, even 16 is a plan. So I did bring for you, the
So,
first page
right.
of 21 says, "The CIP is a plan, and as such is not to be construed as the Board of Supervisors' approval of any project, nor the budget and appropriation of funds for any project."
I'm
Very
going-
clear.
Going
So-
back, I'm going
yeah.
back to the example you
Yeah.
used about doing the studies.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
For example, such that we could then see, a more accurate, focused cost associated with those. And then we could make a decision whether or not we could go forward. And we could also look at where we were, in the world of, at the bottom
Correct.
going over the top,
Right, right.
or, exactly what was going on with the economy.
Right, right. So staff is very comfortable, either way the board would like to go. You can add it as a project, we don't have all the information, or staff is also very comfortable having you adopt a CIP, knowing that we know that there may be another project in the future that you want to add to this. You just don't have enough information at the time of adoption of the plan to add it to the plan. I'm very comfortable either way.
So what we're going to get, the follow-up that we're looking for is conversation is taking place,
It-
proposed dollar figures,
Mhm,
time frame implementation, those kind of things.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what we need to make a decision.
But we want to be clear, what I want to make sure, we're going to bring forward the CIP to you on the 15th, that will not include that project because we don't have all the information, but we do want to adopt a CIP on that date.
Well, how is
And
that any
I-
different from the Cobb's Creek? We don't have all the information there either.
Right, so we can either put it in or we don't, I'm fine doing it either way. You can let me know what you
Well, if we
want.
know that this thing is out there, let's let the public see that it's out there. Otherwise, it's floating around in an ether somewhere.
Okay,
I agree with Carson.
okay, we will add
So-
that.
So you would capture the number.
Capture
It would be a
whatever
future.
number we think is the best number.
To Mr. Williams' point on page 21, we're saying it's a future project.
And if at that meeting we don't want it in there, we can strike it.
Well, what I want to be able to do is have a discussion,
Yeah.
before and at the 15th about why I do or I don't want to have that in the CIP.
Yes.
Because I know where I'm at,
Right.
but I want y'all to be able to, have the information, make your decision, and I want to be able to speak to what my position is on the 15th. That's what I'm saying, Carson.
Okay, all right.
So
So
we're saying, put it in there. Mr. Hodge saying, let's put it in the line, and then we'll have a discussion. And we'll know where everybody is. We'll have the good data, and
Up or down.
and
Okay.
decide then if it stays in the CIP, it doesn't stay in the CIP.
Okay. So that is all we had on the CIP. We wanted to bring those two, and so we're gonna make those changes. We'll bring it back to you on the
Okay.
15th for adoption with discussion
Okay.
when we have additional information.
Wow, it didn't take as long as I thought. I may could have held off.
Anyway,
Anyway.
shortest meeting we've had on the CIP.
All right, let's, we're now going to have our second public comment period. Anybody wishing to speak, please come forward at this time. Seeing no one, I do. At this time, I want to have the,
Mr. Chairman?
oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, sorry, Mr. Tuttle.
How you doing? John Tuttle from Jude's Ferry Road, and I've been following along on your budget. One of the things that interested me was the free clinic. The free clinic, money's going for the free clinic, just small thought on that. I know all of y'all were interested in that budget area at the free clinic. One thing I want to mention is the church has ministries that could possibly help in that area, and I feel like all of y'all understand that. Some of you have spoken out. I believe it was put forward by Mr. Melton first, asking Dave and Mr. Hodges here, would you want to take that out? And then they didn't make a comment on it, but Mr. Tucker was quoted in the paper as saying public or private, one or the other would suit you fine also. And so, public, anyway, there are programs, ministries within the church that could come in handy, and not to create a copycat ministry or a program that's already in effect. One of the laws or bills that were put before Congress was a non-copycat bill. In other words, you make a study of a bill that's going forward and see if there's any other programs or ministries that can take care of that. And it's just some food for thought I might pass on, and appreciate y'all's work. All right,
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle, for bringing that to our attention. Seeing no one else, I'll close the public comment period. At this time, we'll have the county administrator comments.
Yes, my statement is written, and I'll try not to make it sound as written, but it probably will sound written. And the County of Powhatan recently acquired a domain, which is called powhatanva.com. We obtained it from Network Solutions, which is a website host and domain registrant. When the county staff visited that domain in early April of 2015, it displayed a website from Network Solutions stating that the domain name was available for sale through online auction. So the website that formerly was attached to that domain name was no longer there in early April of 2015. Staff presented this information to me, and then I directed staff to bid on the domain because it was up for auction. On May 19th, Powhatan County won the domain auction with a bid of $1,630. The second highest bidder was $1,530, and it was a bidder named AXILLA22. You don't have to give your real name to be a bidder. So if the county had not bid on it, someone else would have gotten it and would have paid $1,530. The domain auction had 31 bidders and 46 bids throughout that process. Upon acquisition, I directed the staff to redirect that domain to the county's official website, which is located at powhatanva.gov. For years, the county has fielded numerous complaints from citizens and others who've been confused because they thought that the former website that was on powhatanva.com was the county's official site. For example, they would call up and say, I can't find your building permit forms, and we would say they're on the website, and they say, I'm on your website, and they're not there. And we would then say, which website are you on? And then we would then direct them to what was our website with a form. So there's other examples, but that's just one example. In addition, the domain powhatanva.com was directly associated with a Facebook that was entitled Powhatan VA Community and Government. And at my direction, staff requested that Facebook invest the linkage of the county's official website to an unaffiliated Facebook. So once the county owned powhatanva.com, we then had a Facebook that was attached to our domain name. It was on June 1st of 2015 that Facebook sent an email to county staff that said Facebook, had removed or disabled the Facebook page because it violated Facebook community standards. I also want to say that my staff has been, I don't participate in Facebook, but I understand that out on Facebook they have been citing things about my staff. I just want you to know that I assigned this. I take full responsibility. My staff, Callie Jackson and Randy Buzzard, were only doing what I directed them to do. And I take full responsibility for the actions of the county.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
On Facebook, they notified you that Facebook link to the PowhatanVA.com. Being as it was now directed to our website, they took it down? Is that, I didn't understand exactly what you were saying there, how that Facebook
Okay.
got taken down.
I'm not an expert on Facebook.
I'm not on Facebook,
Okay,
so
okay.
yeah, we don't
So,
need a ground.
Powhatan County Government owns a domain called PowhatanVA.com. That domain, PowhatanVA.com, which used to be owned by someone
Right.
else, PowhatanVA.com, was associated with a Facebook
Yes,
page that
yes.
was called Powhatan VA Community and Government. My staff requested a Facebook. Would you please look into the linking of a domain name owned by the county to a Facebook that wasn't affiliated with the county?
So that's how it got.
Right,
it's
correct. And
because-
it was Facebook that made the determination that that Facebook page violated Facebook's community standards.
Because you were a government site, and then you were linking out to Facebook with information.
I'm not sure how it's, sir, I'm not, I don't think.
I'm trying to get at why
Right.
Facebook dropped it.
This is my understanding. My understanding is, I don't know if you are saying that Facebook is linked to our website. I don't understand Facebook, whether Facebook is linked to the county's
Being as
website.
you
But
were
a web,
directed, I think that happened when you bought that domain name of PowhatanVA.com, and then it directs you to the PowhatanVA.gov.
correct.
Then you have a linkage, I'm supposing, to that Facebook page that the Powhatan government didn't have before, but because you bought that domain name.
My understanding,
Is that what
I'm
we're
sorry,
saying?
we will get more technical advice. My understanding is the website was not linked to the Facebook page. That's my understanding. However,
It wasn't linked?
I don't know I don't know, but our website is always linked to the county's Facebook page. It's
Right.
not linked. My understanding is there was a Facebook page out there that was linked to
.com.
PowhatanVA.com. Right. There was a Facebook out there, it was linked to PowhatanVA.com. That was the inquiry that county staff, at my direction, made. Can a Facebook page, which is not a county Facebook page, have a link or association with PowhatanVA.com? We do not know in Facebook's determination which or how that Facebook violated Facebook community standards. Facebook did not give us that information, and maybe they don't. All they did is they said to us, the email says, we have removed or disabled the Facebook page because it violated Facebook's community standards. I do not know what Facebook's community standards are, and I don't know which standard this Facebook page violated.
I think the important thing that you want to be able to tell people is that Powhatan government had no part in taking down the Facebook.
We can't take down a
And
Facebook
I think
page.
that's important.
Well, let
Okay.
me rephrase it.
Okay.
Powhatan government didn't initiate any action on its part to bring down the Facebook page that heretofore existed.
The Facebook page?
Yes.
We did, because it says, at the direction of the county administrator, I directed my staff to inquire of Facebook the linking of the domain name PowhatanVA.com to a Facebook page. That was what we inquired of Facebook. So we did inquire of Facebook. Facebook looked in, I don't know what Facebook did. All I know is we requested that of Facebook, or sent that in. Facebook responded on June 1st saying they have removed or disabled the Facebook page because it violated Facebook's community standards.
I've got a couple
No,
more questions, Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple more
I'm
questions.
sorry I don't know the technical side of
Hey,
Facebook.
guess what?
That's all right, I wasn't
I don't know
here.
anything about
I wasn't
Facebook.
here the Monday night when this came up, so I'm
Right.
just trying to get the facts. Let me ask you this. Did you at all, or any of the staff, inquire before contacting Facebook, the administrator or owner of the Facebook page about delinking?
We did, because Facebook directed, when you look at what Facebook tells you that you must do, not only it says that you send an email into Facebook, but Facebook says you must contact the owner, and we did do that, and the owner did respond.
What was the response?
I'll get you the response, but it wasn't that they would, I'll get you the response. I can get those for you, Mr. Hodge.
Okay, second question. This is a technical question. Maybe we don't have to get an answer to this. That's delinking from one side of the sphere or the internet. Can't you delink from the website side once you own it and control it? You just delink it, don't you do it? I mean, in the modern technological 21st century, I can't believe we can't delink from our side.
I don't know. I don't know the answer
Well,
to
maybe we
that.
can
You want to
answer
know
that.
if you can delink.
I might be able to help. This is hypothetical, but I am on Facebook. When you put up your Facebook page, you have the option of doing a link to a website. So I don't know this, but it's a possibility that if the citizen has a Facebook page with a link to powhatanva.com,
Right.
and then webought.com, that Facebook page could still link to .com, but they don't own it anymore. So that, according to Facebook, would be an improper linkage. In other words, I can't, as a citizen, link my Facebook page to Powhatan County.
Yep.
So that's a possibility, but you're right, Barry.
That's not the question.
No, I know,
That's
you're
not
right.
my question.
The other end, you're right. If you have a website, you can link or unlink Facebook anytime you want
I
to.
mean, if I drill down deep enough with my old assembler language from Sac State University, I can go in there and read the code line that's linking it and knock it out.
Big time. Absolutely.
I could just delink it on my side of the fence. It's hooked up on either end electronically with zeros and ones.
But I
I
think
mean, I'm
it's
just saying,
important-
can't I go in and just delink it when I own that web page? I say goodbye.
Right. You can do
I would
that.
also like to point, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's
But
right.
we never, in this explanation that was written to me by my technical, it never says that powhatanva.com was linked to the Facebook. It says powhatanva.com was directly associated. I do not know what that
Maybe we need to
interpretation
know,
is.
maybe we're using the wrong terms. I don't know,
So-
maybe we need to find
so-
out exactly what that
Yeah,
means.
Right.
like
I
I
don't know what that
said,
means.
that example is hypothetical, but it's a
Yeah.
possibility.
Right.
But, you know, I own 3 websites, and you can link and unlink from Facebook any
Right.
old time you want to.
So-
Maybe it's not linked.
Let me follow up, Larry, because I think
Sure.
you and I were saying similar things, but you with more specificity. So the question comes in, could we have just delinked? You know, once
Or
we
deassociated.
acquired the new domain name, we could have uncoupled ourselves from that Facebook.
Correct.
Could we have done that? Or
Yeah,
did-
That's
I
the
think
question.
that's-
That's the
Facebook.
That's the
question.
question I think
That's
Larry
the
and
key
Barry
question.
have been asking.
We'll
from-
find out the answer to that question, for sure. I know that you're saying that, and I see someone in the audience who's nodding that's saying, that doesn't agree with what you're saying.
From the website end, you should be able to,
Okay.
Disassociate.
but from the Facebook end, can they still click on the link on the Facebook page
And
and
go.
now get into our, quote-unquote, our website?
I also
That's
want to
another-
point
that's another
out,
question.
That's
another
the-
sub-
that's
another
the other
sub-question.
side I was
Exactly.
talking
You still
about. Is
disassociate,
that
but can they
possible?
still go? Is it one way still?
I also want to point out that you're having a discussion about the issue was that it was linked. So I want to point out that was not the issue. We inquired not that it was linked, we inquired that it was directly associated. Facebook responded nothing about a link
Okay.
or unlinking. Facebook only responded saying because it violated Facebook's community standards. We do not know what standard, Facebook did not tell us what standard that,
It's not our business, is
it-
it?
Well, it
no,
is.
it's not
To
our
David's point.
basement.
Not, yes.
Right.
No,
It's
my
not our
question-
business,
But my
so,
question goes before that. My question goes before the inquiry. You have the inquiry, but before the inquiry, my question, and even Larry's sub-question, you're right, there's a sub-question, there's 2 questions, there are technical
Right.
questions. The question before the inquiry, whether the inquiry to Facebook is look into linking or look into association or direct association, whatever term was used, before that inquiry, the question is, upon purchase, bidding and purchase of the domain name, there's 2 questions. One, can't you on this side, here's the Facebook page, and it's 2 ways, let's say at that point, can't we disassociate, delink, whatever term you want to use in technology? And then the other question Larry's brought up is, okay, even if you did that, And that severs me going from the website to the Facebook page, but can the Facebook page still go there? I don't know. That's the question, and the time frame is pre-inquiry before Facebook's fuse is lit. Before you go, it's out of my hands, I've shot that bullet, it's gone. Facebook, you do what you want. What was done before that trigger was pulled? That's the question. That's my question.
I think it's important, to two things I take out of this, is A, we bought the website on a public auction. B, it wasn't our decision to shut Facebook. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Hodgson, I don't disagree.
I'm just trying to get the facts.
But it wasn't our decision to shut the Facebook page down, it was Facebook's decision to shut it down.
I understand
The facts
that.
that you're asking for.
I understand
But
that.
I just think it's important that we remember that we bought it on a public auction, and there were multiple bidders, and that we did not shut down the Facebook page. Facebook shut it down. Was it because of our inquiry or not, or or all those things? You know, but I think it's important to remember those two issues.
I think those issues are fine. I just want all the facts, that's all. I just found out about it. I didn't know anything about it at all. I'm just trying to get the information.
Okay? And you can have it. I mean, I don't
It's a
think.
public meeting.
Well, no,
I mean-
I mean, I'm not trying to say you shouldn't get the information. I'm just saying I think it's important to remember these two issues.
That's fine.
So,
I'm just trying to find out the sequence of events, what happened, and I think that's a critical question.
Pat, why don't you do this? You know, go ahead and do the chronology.
We have the chronology
Okay,
completed.
that's good.
Okay, but get,
So
send
we'll
send
get
the
you the
chronology
information.
to us, you know, send it to whomever, so that we'll know, you know, what happened, when it happened.
That's it. I can explain to my people, if they're, constituents or whoever. I've already had some phone calls.
But going to a higher issue, do we anticipate buying any more domain names?
We don't have plans to buy domain names.
Well, I didn't have plans to buy this one, to be perfectly honest with you, and I wouldn't have, you know. This type of thing happens all the time. I think it was in the news, you know, where the White House, you had the domain whitehouse.com, and it was going to a porn site, for example. So in some ways, we're richly blessed, you know. If it was only confusing information, we were miles down the road compared to where some people are. I just don't see other localities going proactively at that, buying domain names such that they can redirect things to their website. For example, I went there and played with Chesterfield's website is Chesterfield US. So I key in chesterfield.com. It didn't go to Chesterfield US, it went to Long and Foster. You know, they do the redirections there. I don't want to get into that business. I just think it's easier for us, if we can take care of, you know, powhatanva.gov, that's where I want to be.
Do we own any others other than the two now? I mean, I know because there's .net and there's all kinds of.
Oh, it's all kinds of.
Yeah, suffixes. I mean,
It's all
I don't
kinds
know.
of
Yes, we do own
concatenations.
others.
If you
You do
go
own
to
others.
goochlandva.gov, that's for sale right now, $1,600, so, you know, it's the same amount we paid.
So how many other ones do we own?
I don't know off the
Okay,
top of
if
my
we
head.
can just get that data. I didn't know that either. I just thought we had the one, and if you have confusion, you make a policy statement about that or something on the website, you may be incorrect or wrong or whatever, and you go from there.
Just adding to it, it's very common for businesses, and like I said, I own 3 websites and 3 matching Facebook pages and have owned others. It's very common to protect yourself to do .com, .org, .gov, .info, .net, .us, the common ones, about a half a dozen. Because if you don't, and somebody wants to put up a copycat website that could damage your brand or misinformation or whatever, and usually these websites, if it's not a very common name, you're paying $5.99 for them. You know, if it's Coca-Cola.com, you're paying $2 million. But, you know, PowhatanVA.net, I'm guessing, is probably like $6 or something. So it's a somewhat, in the business world, it's a somewhat common practice to protect your brand by grabbing the top 5 or 6, that's all.
Yeah, I agree. I'm aware of that as well, Larry, but I don't see local governments doing that.
Private sector.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to board comments. Any board comments?
Just one brief one. Powhatan County yesterday hosted about a half a dozen students from Germany in conjunction with VCU. They had a couple German professors from the Rhineland-Pfalz area, Mosel River-ish, and we Americans sent people over to Germany a couple of weeks ago, and then they came here to Powhatan yesterday, and I thought it was, they're studying rural area planning. All these students were in a major headed toward planning, whether it be city planning or whatever, but this concentrated on the entire Richmond region. They visited a few different counties around here, and Powhatan was the only one that we took them out to a farm. I think we were the only county that had a couple supervisors there, and we really gave this some attention. I thought the event went really well, and it's just really neat to see Powhatan stepping up like that and doing something on an international scale.
I'll add to that. It was, Mr. Norvig was there and I was there. And for those of you who don't know, Mr. Norvig speaks fluent German. So it was an interesting conversation that he had with the professors, and it was nice. It was actually nice to have him there to bridge any language gaps that may have been there. So I thought it was a nice event, and thank you for recognizing that, Mr. Norvig. I have no other comments.
I have a comment. Tomorrow morning, we're having the second annual transportation conference for the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization. Secretary of Transportation will be speaking, as well as their district manager. You'll have GRTC there. You'll have other people from the region that are going to be presenting. So it should be a pretty good event. It's going to be over at Luckstone tomorrow, starting at 9:30. Friday morning, I'm meeting with human resource folks from the Big Four and from other localities, starting the search for the replacement of Bob Crum, who's taken a position with Hampton Roads, a larger planning district commission. So it's a promotion for him, and it's, I think, testament to the fact that he's been outstanding here in the Richmond region for us. So we're going to hate to lose Bob. He's leaving on the 15th. That'll be his last day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. No other comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Please.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We're adjourned.
Was that the Veterans Day?
Veterans Gap Service.
Yes, I did.
You know, that, speaking of transportation, I'll second that. That's a need. Since you're having to drive everywhere.
Yeah, yesterday.